In this video, we'll be breaking down 3 hours of the most painful deaths in Rick and Morty. Let's get started. First up we got Top Hat Jones in Ricksty Minutes. In the episode titled Ricksty Minutes from Season 1, Rick upgrades the Smith family's cable box to receive television programming from infinite dimensions across the multiverse. Among the countless bizarre commercials and shows that appear during their channel surfing session, one advertisement stands out as particularly horrifying. This commercial advertises a breakfast cereal called Strawberry Smiggles, and it features a mascot character named Mr. Top Hat Jones, who meets an absolutely brutal end that shocked viewers when the episode first aired in March 2014. The Strawberry Smiggles commercial begins in what appears to be a typical cereal advertisement format. Mr. Top Hat Jones is the spokesperson for these Strawberry Smiggles, and he's shown enjoying his cereal with an almost obsessive level of enthusiasm. His personality comes across as possessive and paranoid from the very start. He announces his love for Strawberry Smiggles and immediately expresses concern that someone might try to take them away from him. This paranoia becomes the driving force of his entire pitch to the audience. Mr. Top Hat Jones explains his strategy for protecting his beloved cereal from potential thieves. He plans to eat every single piece of the Strawberry Smiggles because once they're inside his stomach, nobody else will be able to consume them. He reassures himself and the viewing audience that the cereal will be safe once it's inside his body. Only he will have access to them at that point because they'll belong to him internally. He describes them as his sniggy little pig doll Smiggles, using affectionate terms that emphasize his attachment to the product. Throughout this opening section of the commercial, he makes it absolutely clear that he intends to keep all of the Strawberry Smiggles for himself and wants to prevent anyone from getting their hands on his cereal. The mascot proceeds to eat the Strawberry Smiggles while the camera watches. He consumes what he describes as the last bite of the cereal. After finishing the bowl, Mr. Top Hat Jones expresses satisfaction with his accomplishment. He announces that all of the Strawberry Smiggles are now resting comfortably in his stomach, exactly where he wanted them. He comments on how good he feels, believing he has successfully protected his cereal by consuming it entirely. At this moment, the commercial seems to have reached what would normally be its conclusion in a standard advertisement format. However, the tone of the commercial shifts dramatically when two children suddenly enter the frame. One child carries a knife, while the other holds a roll of tape. The presence of these children with such specific tools immediately signals that something terrible is about to happen. Mr. Top Hat Jones's paranoia about people trying to steal his Strawberry Smiggles proves to be completely justified, though the method these children plan to use goes far beyond anything a typical cereal mascot would face in a normal commercial. Mr. Top Hat Jones immediately recognizes the danger he's in when he sees the children approaching. He starts shouting at them to get away from him and his Strawberry Smiggles. His voice carries genuine fear and desperation as he repeatedly tells them to leave. He tries to warn them off or escape the situation, but he's unsuccessful in his attempts. The children ignore his pleas entirely and continue advancing toward him with their implements ready for use. The children overpower Mr. Top Hat Jones and knock him to the ground. Once he's down, they use the tape to bind him so he cannot escape or fight back. With the mascot completely restrained and helpless, the girl who's holding the knife takes action. She uses the blade to cut open Mr. Top Hat Jones's stomach. This is where the commercial crosses from dark humor into genuinely disturbing territory. The knife penetrates his body and opens up his midsection, where all the Strawberry Smiggles he just consumed are stored. The children begin eating the cereal directly from inside Mr. Top Hat Jones's open stomach. They're extracting the Strawberry Smiggles from his body and consuming them right in front of him while he remains conscious and aware of everything happening. This is exactly what he feared would happen, though he assumed eating the cereal would protect it. Instead, his attempt to keep the Strawberry Smiggles safe by putting them inside his body has resulted in the most horrific possible outcome. Mr. Top Hat Jones screams in absolute agony as the children harvest the cereal from his open stomach. He calls out to Jesus Christ multiple times, invoking religious pleas for help or salvation from his suffering. His screams make it clear that he's experiencing tremendous physical pain. He explicitly states that it hurts, leaving no ambiguity about the level of suffering he's enduring. The pain is so severe that he cannot contain his anguish or maintain any composure. During his screaming, Mr. Top Hat Jones makes specific observations about his condition that make the scene even more disturbing. He announces that his entrails are out, describing the physical state of his body with his intestines exposed and removed from where they belong. This detail emphasizes the graphic nature of what's happening to him. He's not just cut open, but actually disemboweled while still alive and conscious enough to understand and vocalize what's occurring. In the midst of his suffering, Mr. Top Hat Jones questions the logic of what the children are doing. He asks them why they would even want to eat the strawberry Smiggles at this point, because the cereal pieces are now soaked with his stomach acid. This is a practical concern that highlights how irrational and pointless the children's actions are from any reasonable perspective. The cereal they're eating has been contaminated by digestive fluids, making it unappetizing and potentially dangerous to consume. Yet the children continue anyway, apparently willing to eat stomach acid-soaked cereal just to get the strawberry Smiggles they want. Mr. Top Hat Jones continues his religious pleas as the attack progresses. He calls out to Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior and Spirit, using formal religious language in his desperation. He begs to be saved from this situation. He asks to be taken to the light, which suggests he's hoping for death to end his suffering rather than hoping to survive the attack. This indicates that the pain is so overwhelming that he would prefer to die rather than continue experiencing what's happening to him. The mascot's final moments include a disturbing hallucination or vision. Mr. Top Hat Jones announces that he sees demons. He states this observation and then emphasizes it by repeating that he sees demons coming. Whether these demons are a product of his dying brain, extreme pain-induced hallucinations, or some kind of actual supernatural experience in this dimension remains unclear. But the fact that he's seeing demons in his final moments adds a spiritual horror element to the already extreme physical horror of his situation. He's not just dying in tremendous pain, but apparently experiencing some form of hellish vision as consciousness leaves him. After Morty witnesses this commercial, he comments to Rick about how hardcore the content was for a cereal advertisement. This reaction from Morty serves as acknowledgement from the show itself that what just played on screen was unusually violent and disturbing even by Rick and Morty standards. Rick responds by explaining that if you want to sell boxes of cereal, you need to pump the gas a little and put the pedal to the metal. His casual response treats the extreme violence as just an aggressive marketing strategy, which adds another layer of dark humor to the situation. The Strawberry Smiggles commercial represents one of the most graphically violent death scenes in Rick and Morty's first season. While the show is known for its dark humor and willingness to show disturbing content, this particular scene stands out because of how prolonged and detailed Mr. Top Hat Jones' suffering is. Many violent deaths in the series happen quickly, but this death is drawn out with explicit descriptions of the pain and physical damage being inflicted. The victim remains conscious throughout the entire ordeal and verbally describes his own disembowelment while it's happening. The commercial also works as satire of how mascots in real cereal commercials are often portrayed as protective of their product. Characters like the Trix Rabbit or Lucky the Leprechaun spend their advertisements trying to keep their cereal away from children who want to eat it. The Strawberry Smiggles commercial takes this dynamic to its absolute darkest possible conclusion. Instead of the children being denied cereal through cartoon antics, they use realistic violence to literally cut the cereal out of the mascot's body. It transforms a familiar advertising trope into a horror scenario. The fact that this brutal murder appears in a commercial rather than a show also adds to its impact. Commercials are typically the safest, most sanitized content on television because they're designed to sell products without offending potential customers. By placing such extreme violence in an advertisement format, the scene violates viewer expectations about where they might encounter disturbing content. The cheerful music that plays during parts of the commercial creates a tonal dissonance with the horrific violence on screen, making the scene even more unsettling. Mr. Top Hat Jones' death also raises questions about the nature of the dimension this commercial comes from. In that reality, apparently it's acceptable to broadcast advertisements showing children murdering a mascot by disemboweling him and eating cereal from his stomach cavity. This suggests a world with very different standards for what constitutes appropriate content for television audiences. The casual way Rick and Morty discuss it afterward implies this type of extreme content might be normal in that dimension, which is somehow even more disturbing than the violence itself. The scene demonstrates Rick and Morty's willingness to push boundaries with its humor and content. While many animated shows might imply violence or cut away before showing graphic details, this commercial shows and describes the violence explicitly. Mr. Top Hat Jones verbalizes his pain and describes his exposed entrails while the attack is happening. The show doesn't shy away from the horrific implications of the premise it's set up. If children are going to cut open a mascot to steal cereal from his stomach, the show commits to depicting that scenario with full awareness of how horrifying it would actually be. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, there's Ruben from Anatomy Park. In the episode titled Anatomy Park from Season 1, a man named Ruben becomes the victim of one of the most prolonged and disturbing deaths in the entire series. Ruben is introduced as an old friend of Rick, who the scientist checks in on once a year to give him a medical evaluation. When Ruben arrives at the Smith house during Christmas, he's wearing a Santa hat and appears to be a veteran based on his tendency to call out names of military conflicts like Pearl Harbor and Korea. Rick takes him to the garage for what's supposed to be a routine checkup, but the situation quickly becomes dire. Rick immediately recognizes that Ruben is in bad shape physically. The extent of the problems becomes clear when Rick shrinks Morty down to microscopic size and injects him into Ruben's body. Inside this man, there exists an entire amusement park called Anatomy Park that Rick and a scientist named Dr. Xenon Bloom have built as a business venture. The park features attractions like Spleen Mountain, Bladder Falls, and Pirates of the Pancreas, with the concept being that tourists could be shrunk down and explore the inside of a living human body while enjoying themed rides and exhibits. However, the park's security system has completely shut down, and all the exhibits containing dangerous diseases have been unlocked. Dr. Bloom explains that the entire security system failure happened because Ruben's brain is not getting enough oxygen. When the group checks the respiratory system, they discover that airflow is down 20%. This means Ruben's brain is being starved of the oxygen it needs to function properly, which is why critical systems throughout his body are failing. The lack of oxygen to the brain represents the beginning stages of Ruben dying, though he remains alive at this point. The diseases that were supposed to be contained as educational exhibits are now loose throughout Ruben's body. Hepatitis A appears first, a large and aggressive creature that chases the group through the liver area. The liver is described as being under maintenance because Ruben has seen some rough years in his life. Rick mentions that you don't agree to have a theme park built inside you if your life is going great, suggesting Ruben has struggled with various health issues and possibly substance abuse problems that have damaged his organs over time. When the group flees to the respiratory system to escape hepatitis A, they find themselves in an area called alveoli forest. This represents the tiny air sacs in the lungs where oxygen is absorbed into the bloodstream. The lungs contain bacteria trapped in scar tissue, but the barriers keeping them contained have been compromised. Tuberculosis starts crawling out toward the group. One of the staff members, named Poncho, starts shooting at the tuberculosis with his gun, despite warnings not to fire weapons inside the respiratory system. The gunfire triggers Ruben to cough. This is the first major physical trauma that Ruben experiences during his death. When someone coughs, it's a violent expulsion of air from the lungs, and for Ruben this represents his body trying to clear the irritation caused by the damage happening inside. From inside his body, the cough appears as a massive force that lifts everyone off the ground. A worker named Alexander, who is dressed in a dog mascot costume, gets caught in the cough. Morty tries to save him by grabbing his hand, but Alexander's grip slips and he's coughed up out of Ruben's body. The force of being expelled through the respiratory system and out of Ruben's mouth completely destroys Alexander. His skin and soft tissue are peeled off his body during the violent journey up through the throat and out into the external world. The remains of Alexander, covered in Ruben's saliva and mucus, splatter onto Rick's forehead as Ruben coughs directly into Rick's face. This demonstrates the incredible force that Ruben's coughing fit generates, strong enough to tear apart a human body during its passage through the airways. After escaping the respiratory system, Morty contacts Rick to report that Ruben has tuberculosis loose in his body. Rick immediately says this is great work and pulls out a massive syringe, announcing he will just cure the tuberculosis. However, at that exact moment, the heart monitor that Rick has attached to Ruben begins making a flatline sound. The continuous tone indicates that Ruben's heart has stopped beating. His heart gives out completely, ending the pumping of blood throughout his body. Rick tosses the syringe over his shoulder and states plainly that he cannot cure death. This marks the official moment when Ruben transitions from being a dying man to being a dead body. However, the people still inside his corpse must now deal with the aftermath of being trapped in a body that is no longer alive. The situation has transformed from a medical emergency into a survival horror scenario where the tiny people must escape from a rapidly decaying corpse. Dr. Bloom explains that the body is beginning to constrict and fill with gas. When a person dies, the bacteria that normally live in the digestive system begin to break down the body's tissues. This bacterial action produces gases as a byproduct, causing the corpse to bloat and swell. The people inside can actually feel the body constricting around them as these gases build up. The internal pressure is increasing, making the environment inside Ruben's corpse increasingly dangerous and unstable. The smell inside the dead body becomes overwhelming. When Morty asks about the horrible smell, Dr. Bloom jokes about it being a Panda Express restaurant before admitting that the body is filling with the gases produced by decay. The group is literally breathing in the fumes of decomposition as Ruben's tissues begin to break down. Every breath they take is filled with the chemical compounds released as his cells die and bacteria consume his remains. The group must travel through Ruben's digestive system to reach an emergency evacuation point in the colon. Dr. Bloom reveals that the scar tissue containing the tuberculosis was deliberately sabotaged, meaning someone intentionally released the disease that contributed to Ruben's death. As they move through the intestines, they encounter more horrors. The animatronic displays that were meant to entertain visitors are still operating, singing a song about the small intestine while the group floats through waste material in a raft. Gonorrhea rises up from the river of waste in the intestines. This sexually transmitted disease appears as a large creature that attacks the group. Dr. Bloom incorrectly states that gonorrhea cannot see them if they don't move, then immediately corrects himself by saying he was thinking of a different creature. The disease capsizes their boat, and they all fall into the waste material filling Ruben's intestines. They must swim through the contents of his digestive tract to reach safety. Morty suggests using the gas that's filling the corpse as a weapon. Poncho lights a match and throws it at the gonorrhea, igniting the methane and other flammable gases that have built up inside the dead body. The explosion kills the gonorrhea, but also demonstrates how dangerous the internal environment has become. The corpse is essentially a pressure cooker of toxic gases that can explode if ignited. The sphincter dam represents another horrifying element of Ruben's death. This dam was built when Ruben became incontinent, meaning he had lost control of his bowel functions while still alive. The dam was designed to help manage this condition, but it was never intended to hold back the contents of a corpse's intestines. As the body fills with gas and waste, the dam begins to groan under the pressure. The structure is clearly failing and about to burst. One of the workers named Roger gets his foot stuck in machinery near the sphincter dam. He tells the others to go on without him and asks them to tell his family he loves them. Before he can finish his message, the dam bursts completely. An enormous wave of Ruben's excrement floods the area, drowning Roger instantly. He's swept away and killed by the contents of the dead man's bowels, representing one of the most undignified ways to die imaginable. The worker named Poncho is revealed to be the saboteur who released the tuberculosis. He was planning to steal samples of bubonic plague to sell to terrorists and other groups who would pay top dollar to decimate populations. During his villainous speech, bubonic plague bites him on the shoulder. Poncho backs away from the disease and falls over a railing, plummeting to his death somewhere in the lower regions of Ruben's corpse. His body joins the waste and decay that fills the dead man's interior. Rick decides that the only way to save Morty and the remaining survivors is to make Ruben's body enormous, so that the microscopic people will return to their normal size relative to Ruben. He loads Ruben's corpse into his spaceship and flies up into Earth's orbit in outer space. He inserts a bundle of dynamite into an incision he makes in Ruben's abdomen, then kicks the dead body out of the spacecraft into the vacuum of space. Using a growth ray, Rick increases Ruben's size until the corpse is absolutely massive. The body becomes so large that it can be seen from anywhere in the continental United States. Ruben's giant naked corpse floats in the sky above America, with different body parts visible from different locations. People in New York can see his face hovering overhead. People in Los Angeles see his enormous feet. News reporters comment on every visible part of the gigantic dead body. A reporter in New York describes looking up at Ruben's face, noting that his eyes are not twinkling and his dimples are not merry, but he's standing under a nose like a 70-mile cherry. Another reporter in Los Angeles comments on the giant feet visible on the West Coast, noting they are enormous, even relative to the giant man's size. The reporter makes a joke about what they say about large feet, and another reporter suggests that people in the Rocky Mountains are seeing something related to that implication. A lumberjack in the mountains looks up, screams in terror, and runs away from whatever part of Ruben's anatomy is visible there. Morty and Annie manage to escape through Ruben's left nipple just before the dynamite explodes. The explosion tears Ruben's giant corpse apart completely. Blood and chunks of tissue spray in every direction from the blast. Because Ruben's body is so enormous and floating above the United States, the explosion causes blood and pieces of flesh to rain down across the entire country. The Smith family is outside preparing to go sledding when blood suddenly starts splattering against the sliding glass door. They watch in horror as blood pours from the sky like rain. Summer announces that it's raining blood while everyone panics. The television news reports that the giant naked sky Santa has exploded and that blood and chunks of viscera are raining down on the country, but reassures viewers that everything should be fine. The aftermath shows reddish chunks of Ruben scattered everywhere around the Smith house and presumably across much of America. The remains of this homeless veteran are now spread across an entire nation, with pieces of his organs and tissues lying in yards, on streets, and covering buildings. His death has transformed from a private medical emergency into a very public spectacle witnessed by millions of people. Throughout this entire ordeal, Ruben himself is never shown being aware of what's happening inside his body. He arrives at the house already in bad shape, loses consciousness, or dies fairly quickly, and then his corpse is used as a vessel that must be escaped from and eventually destroyed. The audience never sees Ruben's perspective on his own death or hears him speak beyond the military conflict names he called out when he first arrived. The episode treats Ruben's death with dark humor rather than tragedy. Rick shows no particular sadness about losing his old friend, instead focusing on the practical problem of extracting the people trapped inside. The fact that Rick had been using Ruben's body as a location for a commercial amusement park raises ethical questions about the treatment of this vulnerable person. Ruben agreed to have the park built inside him, but Rick himself notes this, suggests Ruben's life was not going well. Ruben's death combines multiple disturbing elements. He dies from organ failure caused by infections and lack of oxygen to the brain. His body then undergoes the natural process of decay and decomposition while people are still trapped inside experiencing it firsthand. His corpse is then transported to space, enlarged to an impossible size, and blown apart with explosives, scattering his remains across an entire country. The death is both intimate, with characters swimming through his waste and breathing the fumes of his decay, and spectacularly public, with his giant naked body visible to millions before exploding. The episode never reveals much about who Ruben was as a person beyond being a veteran and someone who had fallen on hard times. His death serves primarily as a setting for adventure, rather than being treated as a significant loss. This arguably makes the whole situation even more disturbing, as a human being's death and the destruction of his body is used purely for entertainment purposes within the show's narrative. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Krombopulos Michael in Morty Night Run. Krombopulos Michael in S2E2, an alien assassin named Krombopulos Michael meets his end in one of the most sudden and brutal deaths in the series. His death is particularly disturbing because of how cheerful and enthusiastic he was about his profession just moments before being killed, and because of the mechanical nature of how he dies. Unlike many deaths in Rick and Morty that involve weapons or diseases, Krombopulos Michael is crushed under the weight of a spacecraft in a way that emphasizes the fragility of a living body when confronted with massive mechanical force. Krombopulos Michael first appears in a parking garage where Rick has arranged to meet him for a business transaction. Rick is there with Morty, who is learning to fly Rick's spacecraft. When Krombopulos Michael knocks on Rick's window, Rick seems annoyed that the meeting is happening in front of his grandson. He rolls down the window and Krombopulos Michael immediately greets Rick with enthusiasm. He hands Rick 3,000 flurbos, which is the currency used in that part of the galaxy. He asks if Rick has the weapon he ordered. Rick tries to keep the conversation brief because Morty is present, but Krombopulos Michael does not pick up on these social cues. He introduces himself directly to Morty in a friendly manner, stating his full name and immediately explaining his profession. He tells Morty that he is an assassin and that he purchases guns from Rick. This direct honesty about being a professional killer is the first indication of how unusual Krombopulos Michael is as a character. Most people who kill for a living would try to hide or downplay this fact when meeting a child, but he announces it openly as if it were any normal job. Rick hands over a case containing an antimatter gun. This is not a regular firearm, but a specialized weapon that fires antimatter, which is the opposite of normal matter. When antimatter comes into contact with regular matter, both are destroyed in a burst of energy. Krombopulos Michael examines the weapon and comments on how deadly it looks. He explains that his current target cannot be killed with regular matter, which is why he needs this specific type of weapon. This reveals that he has been hired to kill something very unusual, likely not a regular biological creature. Krombopulos Michael then tries to give Morty his business card for future reference. He tells Morty that if he ever needs anybody murdered, Morty should call him. He describes himself as very discreet, meaning he keeps his work confidential. Rick reacts with shock and frustration that Krombopulos Michael is trying to give a business card to a child, but Krombopulos Michael continues his pitch, making an even more disturbing statement about his work philosophy. He announces that he has no code of ethics whatsoever. He will kill anyone, anywhere, without any restrictions or moral boundaries. He specifically lists children, animals, and old people as examples of targets he has no problem eliminating. The fact that he includes children in this list while speaking directly to a child shows how completely disconnected he is from normal moral reasoning. He emphasizes that it does not matter who the target is. Then he explains his motivation with chilling simplicity. He just loves killing. The act of taking life brings him joy regardless of who dies or why. After Krombopulos Michael leaves, Morty confronts Rick about selling weapons to a murderer. Rick tries to justify his actions by explaining that the situation is more complicated in the broader galaxy than it seems from a planetary perspective. He shows Morty the flurbos he received and explains that with this money, they can spend an entire afternoon at an entertainment complex called Blips and Chits. Morty is appalled to learn that Rick sold a weapon to a professional killer just to earn money for video games. The scene then jumps forward in time to show Krombopulos Michael preparing to carry out the assassination Rick's weapon enabled. He has traveled to a Galactic Federation outpost where his target is being held prisoner. Before entering the facility to kill, he performs a small ritual that reveals a more personal side to his character. He pulls out a heart-shaped locket and opens it. Inside is a photograph of what appears to be a romantic partner, possibly a wife or girlfriend. He kisses the photograph tenderly before putting the locket away. This moment creates a strange contrast with everything else we know about Krombopulos Michael. He loves killing without any moral restrictions, yet he also loves someone enough to carry their picture and kiss it before going into danger. He is capable of genuine affection and attachment to another being, but this emotional capacity does not extend to his victims. The locket suggests he has a life outside of his work, people who care about him and whom he cares about in return. This makes his death more complex because it means someone will mourn him. After putting away the locket, Krombopulos Michael says his now famous catchphrase. He expresses excitement about starting to kill again, as if returning to a beloved hobby after a break. His enthusiasm is genuine and childlike, treating murder as something fun and enjoyable rather than serious or grim. He then enters the facility and begins systematically killing the Gromflemite guards who are stationed there. These guards are members of the Galactic Federation, the government organization that controls large portions of the galaxy. Krombopulos Michael moves through the building with clear expertise and skill. He kills several guards as he makes his way toward the chamber where his target is being held. The fact that he can successfully infiltrate a government facility and eliminate trained security personnel demonstrates that he is genuinely good at his job. His cheerful personality might make him seem silly, but he is actually a highly capable and dangerous professional. He reaches the chamber without too much difficulty and enters it. Inside the chamber, his target is revealed to be a strange gaseous being that floats in a containment cell. This creature is intelligent and telepathic, capable of communicating through thought. Krombopulos Michael approaches the cell and draws the antimatter gun that Rick sold him. He aims the weapon at the gaseous being, preparing to fire and complete his assignment. This is the moment he has been working toward, the culmination of his mission. He is about to pull the trigger and earn whatever payment was promised for this kill. However, at this exact moment, Morty arrives at the facility. Morty has been troubled by the idea that Rick enabled a murder by selling the weapon. He feels responsible for the death that is about to happen and wants to prevent it. He has taken Rick's spacecraft without permission and used the location information from Krombopulos Michael's business card to track the assassin to this government outpost. Morty is trying to do what he believes is the right thing by stopping the killing. But Morty is not an experienced pilot. He has only just started learning to fly the spacecraft earlier that same day. His control of the vehicle is clumsy and imprecise. As he approaches the facility, he crashes the ship through the ceiling of the chamber where Krombopulos Michael is standing. The spacecraft comes down directly on top of the assassin with tremendous force. The mass and momentum of the falling vehicle are more than any biological body can withstand. Krombopulos Michael is crushed instantly beneath the spacecraft. The weight of the vehicle presses down on his body with enough force to break bones, rupture organs, and compress his entire physical form. There is no time for him to react or try to escape. One moment, he is standing with his weapon raised, about to complete his job. The next moment, tons of metal and machinery are falling on him from above. The crushing happens so fast that he likely dies before his brain can fully process what is occurring. The ship's navigation system announces their arrival in a darkly comedic way. The computerized voice states that they have arrived at Krombopulos Michael and notes that their destination is below them. This means the ship's positioning system recognizes that Krombopulos Michael is underneath the spacecraft, crushed beneath it. The casual, helpful tone of the navigation announcement contrasts sharply with the horror of what has just happened. A living being has been reduced to a location marker for a GPS system. Morty is dazed from the crash landing. He says something about being out of off-white Persians, which is a confused reference to the Roy video game he played earlier in the episode where the character worked at a carpet store. This indicates that Morty has hit his head or been shaken up by the impact. He gets out of the spacecraft and looks around, trying to orient himself and figure out where he is. Then Morty sees what has happened. He realizes that Krombopulos Michael is underneath the ship, crushed to death. The sight of this shocks Morty into full awareness. He asks himself what he has done, expressing immediate horror and regret over causing someone's death. Even though Morty was trying to prevent a murder, he has now committed one himself. The moral situation has become much more complicated than the simple good versus evil framework Morty was operating under. Morty bends down and picks up Krombopulos Michael's arm. This detail is particularly disturbing because it indicates that the arm has been severed or torn from the body by the crushing impact. The arm is now a separate object that can be lifted and moved independently. This suggests the incredible destructive force involved in the crushing death. The spacecraft did not just kill Krombopulos Michael by compressing him, it actually tore his body apart. His limbs have been ripped away from his torso. The arm that Morty picks up is presumably still recognizable as an arm, with the alien equivalent of skin, muscle, and bone visible where it has been separated from the rest of the body. Morty also retrieves the antimatter gun that Krombopulos Michael was holding. The weapon survived the crash intact, even though the person holding it was destroyed. This creates a grim contrast between the durability of the tool and the fragility of flesh and bone. At this moment, a Gromflamite guard enters the chamber and points a weapon at Morty. The guard orders Morty to drop the gun. Morty tries to explain that he was trying to prevent a murder, but the guard does not care about Morty's intentions. From the guard's perspective, Morty has just destroyed government property by crashing through their facility, and he is standing in a restricted area holding a dangerous weapon. The guard prepares to shoot Morty. Rick arrives through a portal just in time to save Morty from being killed by the guard. But Rick is furious with Morty for coming to this location. He explains that this is a Galactic Federation outpost, and that he has a bad history with the government. By coming here and causing destruction, Morty has put both of them in serious danger. Rick does not express any concern or sadness about Krombopulos Michael's death. He only mentions it in terms of the business impact, noting that Morty killed his best customer. The death of Krombopulos Michael illustrates several disturbing themes. First, it shows how fragile living bodies are when confronted with massive mechanical force. Krombopulos Michael was a skilled and dangerous assassin who had successfully killed multiple guards just moments before his own death. But all his skill and experience meant nothing when several tons of spacecraft fell on him. No amount of training or ability can protect a biological creature from being crushed under that much weight. Second, the death demonstrates the randomness and arbitrariness of mortality. Krombopulos Michael had no reason to expect a spacecraft would crash through the ceiling at that exact moment. He was in a secure government facility, performing a job he had done many times before. There was no indication that anything unusual was about to happen. Then suddenly, through circumstances completely beyond his control or prediction, he was dead. The universe did not care about his skills, his plans, or the person waiting for him in the photograph. Third, the death raises questions about moral responsibility and unintended consequences. Morty went to the facility with the explicit intention of saving a life. He succeeded in preventing the gaseous being from being killed, but in doing so, he killed Krombopulos Michael. Morty's good intentions led directly to someone's death. The fact that Krombopulos Michael was a professional assassin who loved killing might make his death seem less tragic, but it is still a death that Morty caused through his actions. The aftermath of the death also reveals the practical consequences of killing someone. Morty has destroyed property, killed a person, and attracted the attention of government forces who now want to capture or kill him and Rick. The rest of the episode involves fleeing from authorities and dealing with the complications created by Morty's decision to intervene. What seemed like a simple moral choice to prevent a murder has cascaded into a series of dangerous situations. Krombopulos Michael's death is also notable for how it contrasts with his personality. He was cheerful, enthusiastic, and open about who he was and what he did. He loved his work and approached it with genuine joy. His death is the opposite of this energy. It is sudden, mechanical, and impersonal. There is no drama or excitement, just the brutal physics of a heavy object falling on a soft body. The universe crushed him as indifferently as he killed his own victims. The fact that his arm can be picked up separately indicates the extreme trauma his body suffered. Crushing deaths can cause massive internal injuries as organs are compressed and bones are shattered. Blood vessels rupture and internal bleeding occurs. The pressure can force blood and other fluids out of the body through any available opening. If the crushing is severe enough, the body can be literally torn apart by the forces involved, which appears to be what happened to Krombopulos Michael, given that his arm separated from his torso. The visual of Morty holding the severed arm is one of the more graphic moments in the series. It forces both Morty and the audience to confront the physical reality of what death means. This is not a clean or abstract death. It is messy and horrible, with body parts scattered and a person reduced to broken pieces underneath a machine. The cheerful alien who loved killing has been killed in turn, and his death is just as violent and final as the deaths he inflicted on others. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the police officer in the Vat of Acid episode. In the episode titled The Vat of Acid episode from Season 4, a police officer meets one of the most horrifically ironic deaths in the entire series. His death occurs during the post-credits scene and represents a perfect example of how misplaced confidence and false assumptions can lead to the most painful possible consequences. The officer dies, believing he has a special immunity that does not actually exist, and this delusion leads him directly into a situation where he experiences an agonizing death that could have been completely avoided. The setup for this officer's death begins earlier in the episode during the main story. Rick has created what he describes as a fake vat of acid as part of an escape plan. The vat is filled with what Rick later reveals is actually just jacuzzi water mixed with Mountain Dew, rather than real acid. Rick and Morty use this fake acid vat as a hiding spot, jumping into it and releasing fake bones to make enemies think they have dissolved and died. This trick works successfully at the beginning of the episode when they escape from intergalactic dealers. Later in the episode, after Morty has gone through an elaborate series of events involving what he thinks is a time-saving device, Rick teaches Morty a lesson by merging multiple alternate universes together. This merger brings consequences from all of Morty's actions in different realities crashing down on him at once. Suddenly, there are law enforcement officers, protesters, and various groups gathered outside Rick's garage. These people include representatives from organizations like the ACLU, AARP, NAACP, and others, all holding anti-Morty signs and demanding justice for things Morty did in alternate timelines. Rick forces Morty to jump into the fake vat of acid again to escape this mob of angry people. Morty reluctantly does so, just as his girlfriend from one of the alternate timelines arrives and sees him apparently dissolving in acid. She leaves in tears, thinking Morty has killed himself. Morty sinks to the bottom of the vat and hides there, releasing the fake bones as planned. The crowd sees this display, and most people leave, satisfied that Morty has died and faced consequences for his actions. However, 2 police officers remain behind after everyone else has gone. These cops are skeptical about what they have just witnessed. They suspect that something is not right about Morty's apparent death in the acid. One of the officers decides to test whether the acid is real by dropping a ladle into the vat. This is a reasonable investigative action since they are law enforcement officers trying to determine if a death has actually occurred or if they are witnessing some kind of trick or deception. Morty is still hiding at the bottom of the vat when the ladle drops into the liquid near him. He panics because the officers are still there and have not left as expected. In his panic, Morty decides to blow up the ladle to make the officers think something dangerous is happening and scare them away. He aims some kind of weapon at the ladle from his position underwater in the fake acid. However, his aim is terrible and he completely misses the ladle. Instead, the shot hits one of the police officers directly. The weapon that Morty fires is powerful enough to cut the police officer in half. The officer is bisected by whatever energy or projectile Morty shoots at him. This is an instantly fatal wound as the officer's body is literally split into 2 separate pieces. The upper and lower halves of his body are severed from each other, which would cause immediate massive trauma, catastrophic blood loss, and death within seconds or less. This officer dies before he can even understand what has happened to him. When the first officer is shot and killed, his blood and body matter spray outward. Some of this biological material, along with the fake acid from the vat, splashes onto the second officer who is standing nearby. The surviving officer is hit with a mixture of his dead partner's remains and the liquid from the vat. He is covered in this combination of fluids. The fake acid that Rick created gets all over the surviving officer's skin, clothing, and possibly in his eyes and mouth. The surviving officer touches the liquid on himself and realizes something significant. The substance that just splashed all over him does not hurt. He feels no burning, no pain, no tissue damage. His skin is not dissolving or showing any signs of chemical burns. The liquid feels like nothing more than water with perhaps a slight fizzy quality from the Mountain Dew that Rick mixed into it. To the officer, this seems like a miracle. He was just splashed with what everyone believes is acid from a vat that just dissolved a teenage boy down to his bones. Instead of reaching the logical conclusion that the vat contains fake acid and that Morty faked his death, the officer makes a completely different assumption. He decides that he personally must be immune to acid. He believes that his body has some special property or quality that makes him invulnerable to a substance that would kill or severely injure anyone else. This is an irrational conclusion to draw from the evidence, but the officer fully commits to this belief. He is so convinced of his immunity that it becomes a core part of his identity in that moment. The surviving officer leaves the scene feeling happy and confident. He has just lost his partner in a violent death, but instead of being traumatized or grief-stricken, he is excited about what he believes he has discovered about himself. He makes insulting comments about his dead partner and exposes himself in some way, though the exact nature of this exposure is not specified in the episode details. His behavior shows a complete lack of respect for his fallen colleague and an inappropriate level of joy given the circumstances. Time passes after these events. The officer apparently becomes somewhat famous, or at least notable for his claimed immunity to acid. He tells people about what happened and how acid cannot harm him. His story spreads enough that he receives an invitation to appear on a television talk show. The show is hosted by Johnny Carson, the legendary real-life television personality who hosted The Tonight Show for 30 years, from 1962 to 1992. The real Johnny Carson died in 2005, but in this alternate reality, where Rick and Morty staged Morty's fake death, Johnny Carson is still alive and hosting his show. The officer appears as a guest on Johnny Carson's show. He goes on television in front of a live studio audience and whatever viewers are watching at home. He publicly proclaims that he is immune to acid. He tells his story about being splashed with acid and suffering no harm. He presents this immunity as a verified fact about himself. The officer is confident enough in his belief that he is willing to announce it on national television where millions of people can hear his claim. Johnny Carson and his production team decide to test the officer's claimed immunity. They have prepared a genuine vat of real acid for this purpose. This is not fake acid, made from jacuzzi water and Mountain Dew, like Rick's vat. This is actual acid that can dissolve organic matter and cause severe chemical burns. The production team has obtained and prepared a large enough quantity of real acid to fill a vat that a human being can be lowered into. This represents a significant amount of extremely dangerous chemical material. The officer agrees to be lowered into the real acid vat. He is so confident in his immunity that he sees no danger in this test. He believes the acid will not hurt him, just like the fake acid did not hurt him. He may even be eager to prove his immunity on television and demonstrate his special quality to the audience. He does not understand that he is about to make a fatal mistake based on completely false information and incorrect assumptions about what happened at Rick's garage. The mechanism for lowering the officer into the acid is not fully detailed, but he is placed into some kind of apparatus that will submerge him in the vat. This might be a cage, a platform, a harness, or some other device that can be mechanically lowered. The officer is positioned above the vat of real acid. The audience watches as the lowering process begins. The officer may wave or smile at the crowd, still confident that he will be fine. Johnny Carson and the audience probably expect to see the officer remain unharmed, validating his claims and providing entertaining television. As soon as the officer makes contact with the real acid, the situation changes dramatically. Real acid reacts with human tissue through chemical processes that cause severe damage. When acid touches skin, it begins to break down the proteins and fats that make up the tissue. This creates heat and causes the destruction of cells. The acid starts eating away at whatever it touches. The officer's skin begins to dissolve immediately upon contact with the acid. The pain would be extraordinary and instantaneous. Acid burns are considered some of the most painful injuries a person can experience. The nerves in the skin send intense pain signals to the brain as they are destroyed by the chemical reaction. The officer realizes immediately that something is terribly wrong. He is not immune to acid. His skin is burning and dissolving. He can feel the tissue breaking down. The confidence he felt just moments ago transforms into horror and panic. As the officer is lowered deeper into the vat, more of his body comes into contact with the acid. The chemical begins working on his legs, then his torso, then his arms and chest. Everywhere the acid touches, the skin starts to dissolve. The outer layers of skin break down first, exposing the more sensitive layers underneath to the acid. Then those layers dissolve as well. The acid continues eating through tissue, moving from skin toward muscle and potentially even deeper structures. The officer begins screaming. The pain is so intense that he cannot help but vocalize his agony. His screams fill the television studio. The audience that was expecting to see an entertaining demonstration of immunity is instead witnessing a man being dissolved alive in acid. The screams continue as more of the officer's body is submerged and more tissue is destroyed. He may try to escape or climb out of the apparatus, lowering him, but he cannot get away from the acid that is already on him and eating through his flesh. The document specifically notes that the officer suffers a slow and painful death. This indicates that he does not die quickly or easily. The lowering into the acid happens gradually, prolonging his suffering. Each moment brings more pain as more of his body is exposed to the acid. His death takes long enough that he remains conscious and aware of what is happening to him. He has time to fully comprehend that he was wrong about his immunity, that he made a terrible mistake, and that he is dying in one of the most painful ways imaginable. The officer's screams likely continue throughout the process until the acid damages his throat and vocal cords enough to prevent him from making sound. Or perhaps the pain becomes so overwhelming that his brain can no longer coordinate the muscles needed for screaming. Eventually, the acid destroys enough vital tissue that the officer loses consciousness or dies. His body continues to dissolve in the acid even after death. Johnny Carson and the studio audience witness this entire horrific event. They watch a man melt alive on television. The entertainment they expected to see has turned into a traumatic death. The production crew may try to cut away from the footage or end the broadcast, but the damage is done. Everyone present has seen the officer's final moments. The image and sound of his death is now permanently burned into their memories. The irony of the officer's death makes it particularly disturbing. He died because he believed something false about himself. If he had correctly understood that the acid at Rick's garage was fake, He would never have claimed immunity. He would never have gone on television. He would never have agreed to be lowered into real acid. His entire chain of decisions was based on a misunderstanding that cost him his life in the most painful way possible. The officer's death also represents a dark joke about the consequences of stupidity and false confidence. He jumped to an irrational conclusion instead of thinking through what he experienced logically. He was so eager to believe he was special and unique that he did not question whether his immunity claim made sense. His arrogance and lack of critical thinking led him directly to his doom. The universe punished his foolishness with maximum suffering. From a broader perspective, the officer's death connects to the episode's themes about consequences and learning lessons. The entire episode is about Rick teaching Morty that actions have consequences, even when you think you can avoid them. The officer learned this same lesson in the most brutal way possible. He thought he could confidently proclaim his immunity without consequences. He was wrong, and the consequence was death by acid dissolution. The fact that this death occurs on a television show in front of an audience makes it even more horrible. The officer does not die privately or in an accident where no one witnesses his suffering. He dies publicly, on camera, with people watching. His final moments of agony and his realization that he was completely wrong become entertainment or at least spectacle for others. There is a profound indignity in dying this way, screaming in pain while others watch helplessly or in horror. The production team that arranged this stunt bears some responsibility as well. They obtained real acid and set up a situation where a person would be submerged in it based solely on that person's claim of immunity. They did not verify this claim through any kind of safe testing or scientific validation. They just took the officer at his word and created a scenario that turned out to be an execution. Their negligence or recklessness contributed to the officer's death, though ultimately he volunteered for the test and believed his own false claims. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Wasp Goldenfold. In Edge of Tomorty, Rick Die Rickpeat. In the episode titled Edge of Tomorty, Rick Die Rickpeat from Season 4, a version of Mr. Goldenfold from an alternate dimension, suffers one of the most disturbing deaths in the entire series. This death occurs in a reality where the Smith family are not humans, but instead are wasps, and it demonstrates what happens when intelligent predatory insects treat a human being as prey. The death is prolonged, humiliating, and involves being consumed alive while fully conscious and able to vocalize suffering. This particular death happens as a consequence of Rick's cloning system malfunctioning. In the main timeline, Morty accidentally kills Rick while driving recklessly because he is distracted by a death crystal. These crystals show the holder different possible ways they might die, and Morty has become obsessed with one particular vision, showing him dying as an old man with Jessica, his crush. Rick had installed a backup system that would clone him if he died, but Morty's actions caused the backup data to get rerouted to clone vats in alternate dimensions instead of his home reality. Each time Rick gets cloned in a new dimension, that dimension's version of Rick and Morty turn out to be problematic in different ways. One dimension has a fascist version of the Smith family, another has the family as shrimp-like creatures. Eventually, Rick gets cloned in a dimension where the entire Smith family are wasps instead of humans. These are not small insects, but rather large, humanoid wasps that walk upright, wear clothes, live in houses, and have developed intelligence comparable to humans. Rick finds himself naked and wet in this wasp dimension's version of his garage. The wasp version of Morty discovers him there. Rick tries to communicate and figure out where he is and how to get home. The wasp, Morty, seems somewhat helpful at first, though clearly confused by Rick's primate appearance. The situation becomes more complicated when Wasp Rick arrives and finds this strange human version of himself in his garage going through his belongings. Wasp Rick explains to the human Rick how wasps operate as predators. He describes their hunting and eating behaviors in detail. Wasps eat their prey alive, rather than killing it first. This is a biological fact about many real wasp species, which paralyze other creatures and consume them while they are still living. When they do not eat prey immediately, they lay eggs in the eyeballs of their victims so that when the wasp larvae hatch, they can feast on the living brain tissue of the host organism. Wasp Rick presents these horrific practices as simply natural behaviors for his species. Wasp Rick notes that when you are born that big of an asshole naturally, the least you can do is have a little empathy. This suggests that the Wasp Smith family is aware that their predatory nature is disturbing or cruel by some standards, and they try to compensate by being emotionally supportive of each other. Wasp Rick invites Human Rick to come have dinner with his beautiful family. He also tells Rick to drop any Hitler references or fascist talk because apparently Wasp Morty has been reading problematic content on message boards. The scene transitions to the Wasp Smith family's dining room. The family is seated at what appears to be a normal dinner table setup, similar to how the Human Smith family would eat a meal together. However, instead of having plates of cooked food, they have living prey at the table. The transcript indicates someone at the table is experiencing tremendous pain and terror. This victim cries out repeatedly, begging to be killed. The voice says, "Oh God, kill me, please kill me," multiple times. This desperate pleading indicates that death would be preferable to what is currently happening. Based on the context and the way the scene is structured, this victim appears to be the Wasp Dimension's version of Mr. Goldenfold, Morty's teacher from school. In the main timeline, Mr. Goldenfold is a middle-aged man who teaches math at Harry Herpson High School. He is generally portrayed as somewhat pathetic and unsuccessful in his personal life. In this Wasp dimension, he appears to be human, or at least not a wasp like the Smith family, making him suitable prey for them to consume. The Wasp family ignores Goldenfold's screaming and pleading. They continue their dinner conversation as if nothing unusual is happening. Wasp Morty mentions that he and his friends want to fly around and look for something to sting that night. Wasp Rick warns him to be careful not to waste all his venom. Wasp Morty responds somewhat indignantly that he is not a bee, implying that bees have limited stings while wasps can sting multiple times. Throughout this casual family conversation, Goldenfold continues suffering. The Wasp family members are actively eating him while he is alive and conscious. Wasps consume their prey by chewing and tearing off pieces of flesh. Their mandibles are designed to cut through tissue and break down organic matter into pieces small enough to consume. For the victim, this means feeling teeth or mandibles cutting into skin, tearing through muscle, and potentially crunching through bone. The pain of being eaten alive would be extraordinary. Every bite removes living tissue and creates a new wound. Nerve endings throughout the body would be sending pain signals constantly as more and more damage accumulates. Blood loss would be significant as numerous wounds bleed simultaneously. The victim would feel weaker and colder as blood volume decreases. There would also be the psychological horror of watching pieces of your own body being consumed by creatures sitting around a dinner table having a pleasant family conversation. Wasp Beth speaks during the meal, asking Wasp Rick if he could maybe borrow Morty after dinner to help the lost Rick get back to his primate-based reality. Wasp Rick asks Morty if he has finished his homework. Morty admits he has not completed all of it. Wasp Rick tells him not to be sorry because they are all in this together. He emphasizes that they are wasps, not monsters. This statement is darkly ironic given that they are literally eating someone alive at that moment while that person begs for death. The assertion that they are wasps and not monsters suggests the family draws a moral distinction between being predatory by nature versus being cruel for cruelty's sake. They see their behavior as natural and therefore acceptable, even though it causes extreme suffering. They do not view themselves as evil or sadistic. They are simply doing what wasps do, which happens to involve eating other creatures alive. This rationalization allows them to maintain their self-image as good people while engaging in behavior that would be considered torture if done deliberately to cause suffering. At some point during the meal, one of the Wasp family members is splattered with something. Someone exclaims in surprise. Human Rick, who has been sitting at the table witnessing this nightmare, comments that he guesses he does not have it as bad as he thought. Seeing another version of himself who is a predatory wasp eating someone alive gives him perspective on his own situation, even though he is also in danger. Then someone asks another family member to pass the acid. This might refer to digestive acid that wasps use to break down their food, or it could be some kind of condiment. Regardless, the request is treated as mundane and normal, just another part of the dinner routine. This casual normality makes the scene even more disturbing because it shows how completely the family has integrated extreme violence into their everyday domestic life. Suddenly, Goldenfold screams again. He yells, "No! Run! Run, my babies!" This suggests that something new and even more horrific has just happened. The most likely explanation based on what Wasp Rick said earlier about wasp reproduction is that one of the family members has just laid eggs in Goldenfold's body. probably in his eyes, as Wasp Rick specifically mentioned. Goldenfold is not just being eaten alive anymore, but has also become a host for wasp larvae that will consume him from the inside as they develop. The phrase, "run, my babies," indicates that Goldenfold may have eggs or larvae inside him that he refers to as his babies. Or he might be hallucinating or speaking metaphorically about his own body parts. The command to run suggests he wants these babies to escape from inside his body before the wasp larvae consume them. But there is no escape. Whatever has been implanted in him will remain there and will eventually hatch and eat their way out. One of the wasps says, "bonus," in response to Goldenfold's screaming about his babies. This exclamation treats the additional suffering or the egg laying as a positive extra benefit, like getting something for free or finding an unexpected advantage. The wasp is pleased about whatever just happened to Goldenfold. This casual cruelty shows how completely divorced the wasp family is from any empathy toward their prey. They can be kind and supportive to each other while treating victims with complete indifference or even pleasure in their suffering. The scene demonstrates several layers of horror in Goldenfold's death. First is the physical pain of being eaten alive. Tissue is being torn from his body in chunks while he remains conscious. Nerve endings are exposed and damaged. Blood vessels are severed, causing both external and internal bleeding. Bones may be broken or chewed through. The digestive process might even begin while parts of him are still attached to his body, if the wasps are regurgitating digestive fluids onto him. Second is the psychological torture of the situation. Goldenfold is being consumed as dinner by an ordinary suburban family having a normal evening conversation. They talk about homework and plans with friends while tearing flesh from his bones. This juxtaposition of mundane domesticity with extreme violence creates a surreal nightmare quality. Goldenfold cannot understand how they can be so casual about his suffering. He cannot comprehend being reduced to mere food, a thing rather than a person. Third is the humiliation and dehumanization. Goldenfold is stripped of all dignity and agency. He cannot defend himself or escape. He can only beg for mercy that will not come or for death that comes too slowly. He is conscious and aware throughout his consumption, forced to experience every moment of his body being destroyed and eaten. His screams and pleas are ignored as background noise to the family's conversation. His personhood means nothing to them. Fourth is the helplessness and isolation. Nobody is coming to save Goldenfold. He is alone in his suffering. Even human Rick, who is sitting at the same table and witnessing everything, does not help him. Rick is focused on his own survival and getting home to his own dimension. He cannot or will not intervene to stop the wasps from eating Goldenfold. So Goldenfold dies, knowing that even a potential ally chose to watch rather than help. Fifth is the prolonged nature of the death. Being eaten alive is not quick. It takes time for predators to consume enough of a body to cause death. Goldenfold remains alive and screaming for an extended period while the family eats their dinner. He has to endure multiple bites, multiple wounds, watching pieces of himself disappear into the mouths of the creatures eating him. Death comes slowly through blood loss, shock, organ failure, or eventually having something vital consumed. The fact that eggs are laid inside him adds another dimension of horror. Even if he somehow survived the initial consumption, which seems unlikely, he would still die when the larvae hatched and began eating him from the inside. The larvae would be programmed by instinct to consume the flesh surrounding them. They would eat their way through his body as they grew, eventually emerging from his corpse. This delayed death would involve days or weeks of feeling movement inside his body and knowing what was coming. Goldenfold's death also serves as exposition about how the wasp dimension functions. The scene establishes that in this reality, wasps are the dominant intelligent species, and humans or human-like creatures are prey animals. The power dynamic is completely reversed from the normal relationship between humans and insects. Here, the insects are huge, intelligent, organized, and technologically advanced, while humans are apparently helpless victims. This creates an uncomfortable role reversal that highlights how arbitrary dominance hierarchies can be. The scene functions as dark comedy in the context of the show, but the actual death being depicted is genuinely horrific. The humor comes from the absurdity and the contrast between the normal family dinner setting and the grotesque reality of what is happening. But if you focus on Goldenfold's experience rather than the wasp's casual attitude, the scene is pure nightmare fuel. A person is being eaten alive while begging for death and nobody cares. Human Rick witnesses this entire event, and his main reaction is relief that his own situation is not this bad. He has been jumping between dimensions where different versions of himself face various problems. But seeing himself as a predatory wasp eating someone alive makes him grateful for his human form despite his current predicament. The scene gives him perspective and makes him realize that being human and maintaining empathy is valuable even when it is inconvenient. The death of Wasp Goldenfold represents one of the most sustained and detailed depictions of suffering in Rick and Morty. Most deaths in the show are quick or happen off-screen or are played purely for shock value. But this death unfolds slowly during an extended scene where we hear the victim's screams and pleas while the perpetrators casually ignore them. The audience is forced to sit with the discomfort of knowing someone is being eaten alive just off-screen while family members chat about their day. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have Rick Prime in Unmortrican. In the episode titled Unmortrican from Season 7, Rick Prime meets his end in one of the most brutal and personal deaths in the entire series. Unlike most deaths in Rick and Morty that happen quickly through weapons or technology, Rick Prime dies slowly through repeated physical blows delivered by Rick C-137. This death represents the culmination of Rick's decades-long quest for revenge and demonstrates what happens when advanced technology is stripped away and a genius scientist is reduced to using his bare hands to kill his greatest enemy. Rick Prime is the original Rick from the dimension where Morty Smith was born. He is the Rick who invented interdimensional travel and showed other versions of Rick across the multiverse the infinite possibilities that existed. Most importantly, he is the Rick who murdered Diane Sanchez, the wife of Rick C-137, which set Rick on his path of revenge that has driven much of the series. Rick Prime represents everything Rick C-137 could have become if he fully embraced nihilism and cruelty without any remaining attachments. The episode reveals that Rick Prime did not just kill Rick C-137's wife. He killed Diane in every single universe across infinity, using a weapon he created called the Omega device. This weapon has the power to erase a specific person from every reality simultaneously, which means every version of that person ceases to exist everywhere. Rick Prime used this weapon specifically to eliminate Diane from all possible timelines, making her the only person in the multiverse who cannot exist in any form anywhere. Rick and Morty have been tracking Rick Prime throughout the episode using advanced scanning technology. They eventually locate his lair, which houses the Omega device. Rick arrives at this location determined to finally kill Rick Prime and complete his revenge quest. Morty and Evil Morty follow him despite Rick wanting to face Prime alone. A vicious fight breaks out involving Rick C-137, Morty, Evil Morty, and Rick Prime. During this battle, both sides use advanced weaponry and technology. Rick Prime has various defensive systems and combat enhancements, including a healing field that repairs damage to his body. This healing field allows him to survive injuries that would kill a normal person. He can take bullets, energy blasts, and physical trauma while the healing field continuously repairs the damage. This makes him extremely difficult to kill through conventional means. The fight is described as vicious and brutal. All parties involved exchange attacks using futuristic weapons and technology. At various points during the battle, both Rick C-137 and Morty are knocked unconscious from the violence and damage they sustain. The combat is intense enough that even with their own technological advantages, they cannot easily overcome Rick Prime's defenses and combat capabilities. Eventually, Evil Morty manages to turn the tide of the battle through deception rather than raw power. He swaps outfits with Morty and approaches Rick Prime, pretending to be Prime's original grandson. Rick Prime apparently has some attachment to, or at least recognition of, his original Morty, which allows Evil Morty to get close enough to incapacitate him. This moment of vulnerability, created by exploiting Prime's connection to his grandson, gives Evil Morty the opening he needs. Evil Morty drags the incapacitated Rick Prime into another room separate from the main battle area. He restrains Prime so he cannot escape or fight back effectively. With Prime helpless, Evil Morty scans his mind, using technology that can read and download information directly from a person's brain. This scanning process allows Evil Morty to access all of Rick Prime's knowledge, memories, and the locations of his various backup systems. One of the most important things Evil Morty discovers through the mind scan is the location of all Rick Prime's backup clones. Like many Ricks, Prime has created clones of himself that will activate if he dies, essentially giving him multiple lives or the ability to resurrect himself. These backup clones are stored in various locations across dimensions. Evil Morty uses the information from the mind scan to locate every single backup clone that Rick Prime has created. Evil Morty then systematically erases or destroys all of these backup clones. He does this before allowing Rick Prime to die to ensure that Prime cannot come back through any technological means. By eliminating the backups first, Evil Morty guarantees that whatever death Rick Prime experiences will be permanent and final. There will be no resurrection, no clone activation, no way for Prime to escape the consequences of his actions. After erasing the backup clones, Evil Morty also downloads the complete schematics and specifications for the Omega device from Rick Prime's mind. He wants this information for his own purposes, recognizing the Omega device as an extremely powerful weapon that could threaten even him in his location outside the central finite curve. By obtaining these plans, Evil Morty ensures he has the knowledge to either recreate the device or defend against it if necessary. With Rick Prime fully restrained, his backups erased, and the Omega device information secured, Evil Morty drags Rick C-137's unconscious body into the room. Rick has been knocked out during the earlier fighting and is not currently aware of what is happening. Evil Morty revives Rick using technology that brings him back to consciousness. Rick wakes up to find himself in a room with his restrained enemy and his strange ally. Evil Morty offers Rick complete freedom to get his revenge on Rick Prime. This is the moment Rick has been working toward for decades. His wife was murdered. He abandoned his original dimension. He traveled across infinite realities searching for the person responsible, and now that person is helpless before him. Evil Morty steps back and allows Rick to do whatever he wants to Rick Prime without interference or judgment. Rick Prime immediately warns Rick that he should stop Evil Morty while he has the chance. Prime recognizes that Evil Morty is dangerous and has his own agenda that may not align with Rick's interests. He suggests that Rick should be fighting Evil Morty rather than focusing on revenge against Prime. This warning demonstrates that even in his restrained and helpless state, Prime is still thinking strategically and trying to manipulate the situation to his advantage. Rick ignores this warning completely. He has no interest in Rick Prime's strategic advice or attempts at manipulation. Rick has waited too long and sacrificed too much to let anything distract him from finally killing the person who destroyed his life. Rick begins punching Rick Prime. This is not a single blow or a brief assault, but the beginning of an extended beating that will continue until Prime is dead. A crucial detail mentioned in the episode description is that Rick Prime's healing field has been deactivated during the earlier fight. This healing field was Prime's main defense against physical damage. With it active, injuries would repair themselves continuously, making it nearly impossible to kill him through sustained physical trauma. But the healing field is now offline. This means that every punch Rick throws will cause real, lasting damage that will not be repaired. Without the healing field, Rick Prime's body becomes as vulnerable as any normal human body to the effects of repeated blows. Each punch breaks skin, bruises tissue, damages bone, causes bleeding, and creates trauma that accumulates rather than healing. The injuries compound over time. What starts as superficial damage becomes serious injury becomes life-threatening trauma as the beating continues. Rick Prime does not remain silent during this beating. He speaks to Rick, attempting to taunt him even as he is being killed. Prime says that Rick has become just like him in the end. He points out that Rick is now engaging in the same kind of brutal violence and revenge that characterizes Prime's own behavior. By beating Prime to death with his bare hands, Rick is demonstrating that he has been corrupted or changed by his quest for revenge into something similar to what Prime represents. This taunt is Rick Prime's final act of defiance. He cannot escape, he cannot fight back, he cannot survive what is happening to him, but he can try to make Rick feel bad about what he is doing. He can attempt to poison Rick's victory by suggesting that achieving this revenge makes Rick no better than Prime himself. Prime wants Rick to know that the quest for revenge has transformed Rick into a version of the person he hates most. The episode specifically describes Rick Prime as being slowly beaten to death. This indicates that the process is not quick or efficient. Rick does not kill Prime with a few powerful strikes. Instead, the death unfolds gradually over time through repeated blows. Rick keeps punching again and again, each impact causing more damage, each hit bringing Prime closer to death but not immediately ending his life. There are several reasons why this death is slow. First, Rick may not be an expert at killing people with his bare hands. He is a scientist who typically uses weapons and technology rather than physical combat. He may not know the most efficient ways to cause fatal trauma through punching. Second, Rick may deliberately be taking his time. After decades of hunting Rick Prime, he may want to savor the moment of finally having his enemy helpless. Third, even without the healing field, the human body can survive a surprising amount of damage before shutting down completely. Throughout the beating, Rick Prime maintains his defiant attitude. He keeps taunting Rick about having become like him. He refuses to beg for mercy or show fear. He meets his death with the same arrogant confidence that characterized his life. This defiance may be genuine courage, or it may be Prime's final attempt to maintain control over a situation where he has lost all actual power. Either way, he dies as he lived, refusing to acknowledge anyone else's authority or superiority. The physical effects of the prolonged beating would be severe and accumulating. Each punch to the head causes trauma to the brain, which is an organ that does not heal easily from impacts. Blows to the face break facial bones. Damaged teeth cause severe swelling that can close airways and make breathing difficult. Hits to the body crack ribs, damage internal organs, cause internal bleeding. The accumulation of all these injuries eventually overwhelms the body's ability to function. Rick Prime would experience tremendous pain throughout this process. Pain receptors all over his body would be firing constantly, sending signals to his brain about the damage being inflicted. His face would swell massively as tissues become inflamed and fill with fluid in response to the trauma. His vision would become impaired by swelling around the eyes. He might lose consciousness multiple times, only to be revived by the continuing assault. Blood loss would be significant. Facial injuries bleed profusely because the face has many blood vessels close to the surface. A broken nose pours blood. Split lips bleed freely. Damaged gums and broken teeth create bleeding inside the mouth. Internal injuries cause bleeding inside body cavities where it cannot be seen but still contributes to shock and eventual system failure. Prime would be bleeding from multiple places simultaneously. As the beating continues, Prime's breathing would become more difficult. Facial swelling can block nasal passages. Blood can fill the mouth and throat, requiring constant spitting or swallowing to avoid drowning in his own blood. Broken ribs make breathing painful and less efficient. Damage to internal organs can cause fluid accumulation in the chest cavity that further impairs breathing. Prime would be fighting just to get enough oxygen even as Rick continues hitting him. Eventually, the accumulated damage reaches a point where Rick Prime's body can no longer sustain life. This might occur through several mechanisms happening simultaneously. The brain might suffer enough trauma that it can no longer regulate basic body functions. The blood loss might reach a level where blood pressure drops too low to maintain consciousness and organ function. Internal injuries might cause catastrophic failure of vital organs. The exact moment of death comes when these various failing systems all cross a threshold beyond recovery. Rick emerges from the room covered in Rick Prime's blood. The transcript specifically notes this detail, emphasizing just how much blood was spilled during the beating. Blood covers Rick's hands, arms, face, and clothing. This is not a clean death accomplished through advanced technology. This is a messy, brutal, primitive killing that leaves the killer visibly marked by what he has done. The blood covering Rick serves as physical evidence of the violence that just occurred. It cannot be ignored or forgotten. Rick will have to clean himself before he can return to any kind of normal life. The blood is a reminder that he has just killed someone slowly with his bare hands. It represents the final culmination of his revenge quest and the transformation that quest has caused in him. Evil Morty observes Rick after he emerges and notes that Rick appears unsatisfied despite having finally achieved his revenge. This is a crucial observation about what revenge actually accomplishes. Rick spent decades hunting Rick Prime. He sacrificed relationships, abandoned his original dimension, and dedicated his life to finding and killing this one person. Now that it is done, he does not feel the satisfaction or closure he might have expected. The episode ends with Rick experiencing what is described as a 1,000-yard stare, similar to Morty's reaction at the end of Rick Potion number 9. Rick has achieved his goal but feels empty and purposeless afterward. His identity was built around seeking revenge on Rick Prime. With Prime dead, Rick no longer knows who he is or what his life means. The revenge has left him hollow rather than fulfilled. Rick Prime's death represents the dark culmination of a revenge story. It shows what happens when someone finally gets the revenge they have been seeking for years. The death itself is brutal and personal, stripped of the technological sophistication that usually characterizes combat in this series. It is just one man slowly beating another man to death with his fists, while the victim taunts him about becoming a monster. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, the Glorzo-infested hosts in Primordius. In the episode titled Primordius from Season 4, numerous hosts infected by face-hugging parasites called Glorzos suffer deaths that combine body horror with the tragedy of being controlled by alien organisms. These deaths occur both as part of the natural Glorzo life cycle and through the violent intervention of Rick and Morty as they try to escape the Glorzo civilization. The episode presents death as something that happens both to the parasites themselves and to any host bodies they inhabit, creating layered tragedy where killing the parasite often means killing the host as well. The episode begins with Rick and Morty waking up with no memory of recent events. They discover they have Glorzo parasites attached to their faces. These creatures are face-hugging organisms, similar to the aliens from the movie franchise that inspired them. The last thing Rick remembers is being in a cave looking at a wet egg. Morty had warned him not to look at the egg, but Rick touched it anyway. This egg was apparently how the Glorzos reproduce and spread to new hosts. When Rick removes the dead Glorzo from Morty's face, a crucial detail about these creatures is revealed. The Glorzo is bleeding, and Morty notices with alarm that it is bleeding acid. This means the parasites have acidic blood running through their bodies, similar to the xenomorphs from the Alien films. Rick confirms this is the last of the acid. He tells Morty to give him 2 tugs on the arm if there is more acid. Morty immediately screams, suggesting the acid is burning him. Rick comments that this seems like a self-destructive life cycle. The fact that the parasites have acid for blood means that injuring or killing them is dangerous for anyone nearby. If you stab or shoot a Glorzo, the acid blood will spray out and can burn whatever it touches. This creates a situation where the parasites are difficult to remove or kill safely. The acid blood serves as a defense mechanism that protects the species even as individual Glorzos die. Rick and Morty must disguise themselves by wearing dead Glorzos on their faces to blend into Glorzo society. They walk through a city that the Glorzos have built, which includes advanced infrastructure like an M&M store, indicating a complex civilization. The Glorzos repeat mantras like "Glory to Glorzo" and "Glorzo is peace" as they go about their activities. Rick and Morty try to find Rick's ship so they can escape. The episode reveals the disturbing life cycle of the Glorzo species. A Glorzo explains that their purpose is to suck on a face, lay an egg, and die. Another Glorzo elaborates that they live for approximately 30 minutes total. In that brief lifespan, they must attach to a host, mature, reproduce by laying an egg that will hatch into a new Glorzo, and then die. The entire existence of a Glorzo lasts half an hour from hatching to death. One Glorzo describes a member of their greatest generation who understood this cycle. This Glorzo knew that what you need to do is suck on a face, defecate an egg, and die. The Glorzo speaking expresses admiration for this approach. When asked if all they do is live half an hour, lay eggs, and die, the Glorzos confirm this is correct. One Glorzo says they love this life cycle and announces their intention to lay an egg right at that moment. The Glorzo begins grunting as it attempts to lay its egg, then it screams. This scream indicates that the egg-laying process is painful or that something has gone wrong. The transcript does not specify exactly what happened, but the scream suggests the Glorzo is experiencing distress or agony during what should be a natural biological function. This moment shows that even the normal reproductive cycle of these parasites involves suffering. Rick and Morty eventually decide they need to fight their way through the Glorzo civilization to reach Rick's ship. Rick says they tried being passive, but now it is time to go in hot, meaning they will use violence. Rick activates what he calls an unnecessarily elaborate suit-up sequence, putting on combat gear. He declares it is time to lick turd, though the actual phrase is more vulgar. They prepare to kill large numbers of Glorzos. The episode montage shows Rick and Morty cutting through Glorzos with swords. Rick comments that he really should not have gone with swords because his wrists are killing him from the repetitive motion. Morty agrees that his wrists hurt as well. They discuss using flamethrowers next time instead. Rick warns Morty against using a laser whip because there is no way Morty would not accidentally chop off his own genitals with such a weapon. During the killing spree, Rick expresses that this feels good because there is no guilt involved. He compares it to Star Wars, suggesting that killing these alien creatures feels morally uncomplicated, like killing faceless enemies in a science fiction film. Morty agrees, and Rick encourages him to give a cowboy-style yell if he wants. Morty attempts a half-hearted yeehaw sound. Rick says that is good enough, and they continue their rampage through the city. Rick mentions that he needed this release of violence. He says it has been a while since he has been able to just let loose and have fun. He apologizes to Morty if he has been taking his stress out on him. Morty says he understands that Rick has a lot on his plate. This conversation happens while they are actively killing countless Glorzos, treating the slaughter as a form of stress relief and entertainment. Rick compares the killing to popping bubble wrap, suggesting it is satisfying in a tactile and repetitive way. He says he is proud of them for not making that comparison earlier, because it would have been cheap and low-hanging fruit. They agree they are better than obvious jokes. They do decide that comparing their actions to Pearl Harbor is acceptable. Rick calls himself the god of death and says the Glorzos should have been a better species. The transcript does not describe in explicit detail what happens to each individual Glorzo during this rampage, but the context makes clear that Rick and Morty are killing them in large numbers with swords and possibly other weapons. Each death would involve cutting or stabbing the Glorzo's body, which would cause their acid blood to spray out. The acid would burn anything it contacted, including potentially other Glorzos nearby or the environment around them. The violence creates a cascading effect of destruction. Killing Glorzos releases acid blood. The acid damages structures and other creatures. The chaos spreads through the city as Rick and Morty cut their way toward their objective. They leave a trail of dead and dying parasites behind them. Many of these Glorzos were likely still attached to host bodies when they were killed, meaning the hosts died as well. Later in the episode, Summer has become the empress of Glorzo society. She has been living among them and has gained power and status. When Rick and Morty arrive to rescue her, she initially does not want to leave. She orders the Glorzos to seize Rick and Morty, turning against her own family. This leads to Rick and Morty being imprisoned by the Glorzos. Eventually, there is a trial or judgment scene where Glorzos gather to punish Rick, Morty, and Summer. Someone among the Glorzos tries to warn the others that Summer is attempting to escape with her family. The Glorzos decide to execute Summer for her betrayal. They prepare to carry out this death sentence. However, before the execution can happen, Morty uses a harmonica to create a specific sound. Rick amplifies this harmonica sound over loudspeakers so it broadcasts throughout the area. The sound has a devastating effect on the Glorzos. They begin gasping and screaming in apparent agony. One Glorzo asks rhetorically if this suffering is what they get for evolving, suggesting the sound is causing them tremendous pain. The harmonica sound appears to be lethal, or at least severely harmful to Glorzos. The transcript indicates they are screaming and gasping as the sound plays. This suggests the noise operates at a frequency or in a way that damages their biology. Perhaps it disrupts their nervous systems or causes their tissues to break down. The Glorzos are helpless against this sonic attack and can only suffer as the sound continues. Rick and Morty did not intend to cause this mass suffering initially. Rick says they thought the Glorzos were evil. The Glorzos respond by asking why Rick would think that, pointing out they had a giant tower that proclaimed, "Glorzo is peace." This suggests the Glorzos may not have been as malicious as Rick and Morty assumed. They were simply living according to their nature and biology. Rick tries to apologize for what happened. One of the Glorzos asks if they should help. Another Glorzo tells them to boo, expressing anger at Rick and Morty rather than accepting their help. The Glorzos say they hate Rick and Morty for what was done to them. They particularly hate Summer, saying they hate her the most. The Glorzos order the Smith family to get out and never return. The episode ends with Rick and Morty back home. They discover another wet egg. A Glorzo hatches from it and attaches to someone's face. Rick declares he is not cleaning up the mess. Someone gets attacked by the newly hatched Glorzo. The cycle appears ready to begin again, suggesting that the violence and death associated with these parasites is an ongoing problem rather than something that has been resolved. Throughout the episode, the deaths of Glorzos occur through multiple mechanisms. There is the natural death that comes at the end of their 30-minute lifespan after they reproduce. There is the violent death from being cut with swords during Rick and Morty's rampage. There is the agonizing death from sonic attack via harmonica. Each type of death involves suffering for the parasites. The relationship between host and parasite adds another dimension to these deaths. The Glorzos attach to faces and presumably control or at least influence their host's behavior. When a Glorzo dies, the host may die as well if the parasite is too deeply integrated with their biological systems. When Rick and Morty kill Glorzos during their rampage, they are also likely killing whoever those Glorzos were attached to. The acid blood creates additional suffering around each death. When a Glorzo is injured, the acid blood sprays out. This acid can burn other Glorzos, burn host bodies, damage structures, and harm anyone trying to help the wounded Glorzo. The acid makes every injury worse and every death more dangerous to those nearby. It transforms each Glorzo death into a potential threat to everyone in the vicinity. The short lifespan of Glorzos means their entire existence is compressed into 30 minutes. They hatch, attach to a host, mature, reproduce, and die all within half an hour. This means Glorzo society is constantly cycling through generations. New Glorzos are born every minute as old Glorzos die after completing their reproductive duty. The city is filled with Glorzos at every stage of their brief lives, all moving toward their inevitable deaths. The episode presents Glorzo deaths as simultaneously tragic and absurd. The parasites have built a civilization with towers, infrastructure, and culture, despite each individual only living 30 minutes. They have created meaning and purpose in their brief existences. Yet, from an outside perspective, their lives are almost comically short. Rick and Morty can slaughter large numbers of them without seeming consequences because new Glorzos constantly replace the dead ones. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the mutants dying in Rickmancing the Stone. In the episode titled Rickmancing the Stone from Season 3, numerous mutants and post-apocalyptic humans called Deathstalkers suffer brutal deaths in a Mad Max-style wasteland dimension. These deaths occur through primitive violence involving blunt force trauma, stabbing, shooting, burning, and drowning. The episode presents a world where death comes quickly and painfully through direct physical combat rather than through advanced technology, creating scenes of raw brutality where bodies are broken and destroyed through simple but effective violence. The episode begins with Rick, Morty, and Summer traveling to a post-apocalyptic version of Earth. They are being chased through the desert by Deathstalkers driving various vehicles. Rick tells Morty to shoot a specific person he describes as the Mohawk guy with a high fade haircut featuring chartreuse with cyan highlights layered on top. Morty loads a shotgun and attempts to shoot at the vehicle behind them but misses his target completely. The Deathstalker Morty was supposed to shoot manages to jump onto the back of Rick's car. One of the other Deathstalkers tells someone to light them up, meaning to open fire on Rick's vehicle. At this point, the Mohawk guy who jumped onto the car presses a button and self-destructs. The explosion kills him instantly, turning his body into fragments that are blown apart by the detonation. This represents one of the first deaths shown in the episode and demonstrates that some Deathstalkers are willing to blow themselves up as suicide bombers to take out enemies. After Rick collects some isotope material, Summer wants to try something when more Deathstalkers approach. A large man called Colossus drives toward them aggressively. His vehicle has Colossus positioned prominently as he charges at Summer. Colossus declares that her blood will be his lotion, indicating his intention to kill her and use her remains in some disturbing way. Summer aims her shotgun directly at the front tire of Colossus's approaching car and fires. The bullet punctures the tire, causing the vehicle to lose control. The car flips over violently from the sudden loss of traction and steering capability. Colossus is thrown from the vehicle as it tumbles. The force of being ejected from a flipping car at high speed would cause severe trauma. Colossus hits the ground and then must claw his way across the dirt away from the destroyed vehicle. The fact that he claws rather than walks indicates he has sustained serious injuries to his legs or spine that prevent normal movement. Colossus looks up at Summer from his position on the ground. He is badly injured and cannot escape or defend himself. He makes a request that reveals just how much pain he is experiencing. He begs Summer to kill him, saying the words, "Kill me, please." This plea indicates that Colossus is suffering tremendously from his injuries and wants death to end his agony. He would rather die immediately than continue experiencing whatever damage the crash has done to his body. Summer agrees to kill Colossus, but adds the qualifier that she is doing it not because he told her to, but because she wants to. This assertion of agency is important to her character in the moment. She then shoots Colossus with her shotgun. The weapon fires, and Colossus dies from the gunshot wound. The transcript does not specify exactly where she shoots him, but given that she is standing over him and he is on the ground, she likely shoots him in the head or chest at close range for a quick kill. After killing Colossus, Summer places one foot on his dead body in a victory pose. Morty is horrified by this display and calls out her name in shock. Rick comments that things are getting darker, acknowledging that Summer's behavior and the situation in general have taken a disturbing turn. Summer's willingness to kill and then pose with the corpse shows how quickly she has adapted to the brutal violence of this post-apocalyptic world. Later in the episode, Morty is forced to fight in something called the Blood Dome. This is essentially a gladiatorial arena where Deathstalkers fight each other to the death for entertainment. Rick has injected Morty with muscle memory, extracted from a severed arm, creating a situation where Morty's right arm, now called Armathy, has combat skills and acts somewhat independently of Morty's conscious control. Morty enters the Blood Dome and immediately crushes a Deathstalker with Armathy. The transcript says he crushes this person, which suggests Armathy smashes down on them with enough force to break bones and rupture organs. Being crushed causes death through multiple mechanisms, including broken ribs, puncturing lungs, ruptured organs, causing internal bleeding, and severe head trauma if the skull is impacted. This Deathstalker dies quickly from the crushing blow. Morty then chokes another Deathstalker with Armathy. Choking cuts off airflow to the lungs and blood flow to the brain through the arteries in the neck. The victim would experience panic and terror as they struggle to breathe. Their face would turn red, then purple as oxygen deprivation progresses. They might claw at the arm, choking them, or try to break free, but cannot overcome Armathy's strength. Eventually, they lose consciousness and then die from asphyxiation. This death takes longer than the crushing and involves more suffering for the victim. Rick encourages Morty to stick and move, to wear his opponent out. This suggests the fighting continues, with Morty using Armathy to strike and kill additional Deathstalkers in the Blood Dome. The transcript indicates that Morty smashes another Deathstalker's head with Armathy. Smashing someone's head involves striking it with tremendous force. The skull fractures under the impact. The brain inside is damaged by the blow and by bone fragments driven into it. Blood vessels rupture, causing bleeding inside and outside the skull. This type of head trauma causes instant unconsciousness and death. After this kill, a new champion is announced, and Morty's Armathy gestures for more opponents, though Morty himself wants to stop. Another Deathstalker jumps into the Blood Dome despite Morty's warnings. Morty tells this person to get out or they will die. He says he has nothing to do with what is happening, but the Deathstalker runs up to Morty anyway, and Morty begins beating him up with Armathy. While beating this Deathstalker, Morty says things that reveal he is projecting his feelings about his parents' divorce onto his victims. He asks why the person would want this to happen, and tells them all they had to do was go away. He references his parents and their custody situation, making it clear he is using the violence as an outlet for his emotional pain. Armathy punches the Deathstalker's head off. The head is completely severed from the body by the force of the punch. Decapitation causes instant death as the brainstem is separated from the spinal cord and all blood flow to the brain stops immediately. The headless body would collapse while blood pumps from the neck stump. Meanwhile, Summer and a Deathstalker named Hemorrhage are hunting in the ruins of what used to be Seattle. They encounter mutants, who apparently live near areas with high radiation. Hemorrhage explains that some people adapted to the new reality after nuclear war, while others huddle near the blast sites. The radiation rotted them away, leaving only their obsession with old commercial advertisements. These mutants are described as having been physically degraded by radiation exposure over time. 4 mutants charge towards Summer and Hemorrhage. Both Summer and Hemorrhage shoot at the mutants with their guns. The transcript says they shoot and kill all 4 mutants. Being shot causes death through blood loss, organ damage, and shock. Bullets tear through flesh, creating wound channels. If vital organs like the heart, lungs, liver, or brain are hit, death comes quickly. Even non-vital hits can be fatal if enough blood is lost. The mutants would feel the impacts, experience burning pain, and likely die within seconds to minutes depending on shot placement. Back at the Blood Dome, more Deathstalkers continue fighting and dying. The episode shows this ongoing violence as entertainment for the Deathstalker Society. Each fight involves Deathstalkers being beaten, broken, and killed while crowds watch and cheer. The Blood Dome floor would be covered in blood from the various deaths that have occurred there. Later, Morty and Armathy sneak into a castle to confront a slave owner who is responsible for Armathy's traumatic past. 2 guards are positioned in the castle. The transcript says Morty and Armathy fight and kill these 2 guards. The specific methods are not described, but given that Armathy has been killing primarily through crushing blows, choking, and punching, these guards likely die through similar physical trauma. Their bodies are left behind as Morty continues into the castle. Inside, the slave owner is in a bathtub with 2 young servants. When Morty bursts through a window, the servants flee. 2 soldiers charge toward Morty to protect the slave owner. Armathy kills them both. Again, the specific method is not detailed, but the soldiers die quickly enough that Morty can then approach the slave owner. Armathy picks up one of their swords, though he drops it rather than using it on the slave owner. The slave owner pleads for his life, arguing that killing him will not change anything, and that he was born into the slavery business, and is himself a victim. Morty asks Armathy if this is the person they came to kill, and Armathy confirms that it is. The slave owner suggests that maybe they should not do it, arguing for a reprieve, but Morty concludes that both he and Armathy need to see their respective journeys through to completion. Armathy begins to choke the slave owner while the man is still in the bathtub. The slave owner's throat is gripped tightly, cutting off air and blood flow. Rick appears and comments that he can wait for this to wrap up. Morty notices Rick but continues with the execution. Armathy dunks the slave owner's head underwater while still choking him. Now the slave owner is being both strangled and drowned simultaneously. The combination of choking and drowning creates layered suffering. The slave owner cannot breathe air because of the hands around his throat. His face is forced underwater, so even if he could draw breath, he would only inhale water. His lungs would burn for oxygen. Water would enter his nose and mouth. He would feel panic and terror as death approaches. The slave owner loses consciousness from the lack of oxygen to his brain. Rick and Morty discuss various things while the slave owner lies unconscious underwater. Then the slave owner suddenly starts gasping for air between gurgles of water. He has somehow regained consciousness and is drowning actively. Morty exclaims in alarm that this is happening. Rick tells him that the longer he waits, the more it will feel like committing a whole murder. He suggests that Armathy called it too early because Armathy was not trained in medicine and did not know how to judge when someone was actually dead. Rick takes Morty's hand and places it around the slave owner's throat, helping Morty complete the choking. Rick says this is the least he can do and that he owes Morty this much. With Rick's assistance, Morty continues choking the slave owner until he actually dies. This final phase of the death is prolonged and involves Morty actively participating rather than just Armathy doing the killing. The slave owner's suffering extends over a considerable period as he alternates between unconsciousness and brief moments of desperate gasping before finally dying. Throughout these death scenes, the episode emphasizes physical brutality over technological killing. Unlike many Rick and Morty episodes where deaths happen through ray guns or exotic technology, this episode shows deaths through crushing, choking, shooting, beating, decapitation, and drowning. The violence is direct and primitive. Bodies break under blunt force. Heads are punched off. Throats are strangled. The victims experience pain and terror in their final moments rather than quick, clean, technological deaths. The post-apocalyptic setting provides context for this increased brutality. Society has collapsed following nuclear war. The survivors have formed tribal groups that value strength and violence. They eat human flesh, fight to the death for entertainment, and solve problems through physical combat. Death is commonplace and unexceptional in this world. The Deathstalkers have built their entire culture around the inevitability and normalcy of violent death. The mutants who live in the irradiated zones have been physically degraded by radiation exposure. Their bodies are rotting while they still live. When they are shot and killed by Summer and Hemorrhage, their deaths are almost merciful compared to the slow deterioration they experience from radiation poisoning. But the transcript makes clear they are still killed violently through gunfire, rather than being allowed to die naturally from their conditions. The episode uses these brutal deaths to externalize the character's internal emotional pain. Morty is processing his parents' divorce by killing people in the Blood Dome. Summer is dealing with family trauma by shooting mutants and posing with corpses. They channel their feelings into violence against others, which provides temporary relief but does not actually resolve the underlying issues. The deaths of the mutants and Deathstalkers become casualties of the Smith family's dysfunction. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Next up, we've got the dinosaur era destruction in Season 6, Episode 6, Jurassic Mort. In the episode titled Jurassic Mort from Season 6, entire civilizations of highly advanced dinosaurs are wiped out across multiple planets through meteor impacts. While the episode does not show these deaths in graphic detail, the implications of what occurred are staggering in scale and horror. Millions or potentially billions of intelligent, sentient beings were killed when massive space rocks crashed into their worlds at tremendous velocity, destroying everything in their paths and creating extinction-level events across multiple planets. The episode establishes that dinosaurs left Earth long ago when their civilization had achieved a technological and moral utopia. They traveled to distant corners of the galaxy, helping other planets achieve the same level of peace and advancement. These were not mindless animals, but highly intelligent beings with culture, technology, ethics, and civilization. They had families, communities, and societies built on cooperation and mutual aid. However, the universe apparently seeks balance. The plot reveals that when dinosaurs evolved into morally perfect creatures, the cosmos responded by creating their opposite. Sentient meteors came into existence specifically to hunt down and destroy dinosaurs. These meteors are not random space debris, but conscious entities with a single purpose: finding dinosaurs and annihilating them, along with everything around them. Rick and Morty visit several planets that previously contained dinosaur civilizations. The episode specifically names 3 locations where dinosaurs were completely wiped out: Tarmus Light, Ronkonkoma, and Alpha Centaurus. On each of these worlds, Rick discovers evidence of what happened. Giant craters mark the landscape where meteors struck. Dinosaur fossils are buried in the ground. The current inhabitants of these planets have their own explanations for the craters and fossils, ranging from using craters as amphitheaters to using them as skate parks. The inhabitants of these worlds do not know the true history. They do not understand that the craters represent impact sites where entire civilizations were destroyed in moments. They do not realize that the dinosaur fossils they find were once living, thinking beings with hopes, dreams, and lives that mattered. The current species treat these remnants as curiosities or resources rather than as evidence of a cosmic tragedy. A meteor impact capable of destroying an entire civilization of advanced dinosaurs would be catastrophic beyond imagination. When a large meteor enters a planet's atmosphere, it is traveling at speeds that can exceed tens of thousands of miles per hour. The friction with the atmosphere creates tremendous heat that causes the outer layers of the meteor to vaporize, creating a brilliant fireball visible across vast distances. But this atmospheric heating does little to slow down truly massive meteors. When the meteor strikes the surface, the kinetic energy is converted instantaneously into heat, light, and shock waves. The impact creates temperatures hotter than the surface of the sun. Everything within miles of the impact point is vaporized instantly. Rock, water, living tissue, buildings, technology, all of it is converted to superheated plasma in a fraction of a second. The dinosaurs at ground zero would not have time to feel pain or understand what was happening. They would simply cease to exist. But the dinosaurs near the impact site who were not close enough to be vaporized would face a different fate. The shockwave radiating outward from the impact point would reach them traveling faster than the speed of sound. Buildings would be flattened. Bodies would be thrown through the air like leaves in a hurricane. The overpressure wave would crush internal organs and rupture eardrums. Those who survived the initial shockwave would face fires ignited by the intense heat and debris falling from the sky. The impact would throw millions or billions of tons of material into the atmosphere. This ejected material would rain back down across the planet. Some pieces would be as small as pebbles. Others would be boulders the size of houses. Each piece falling from the sky would be heated to extreme temperatures by atmospheric friction, essentially becoming a meteor itself. The dinosaurs would experience a rain of fire, falling from above, setting forests ablaze and crushing anything in their paths. The dust and debris thrown into the atmosphere would block out sunlight. Temperatures would plummet as the planet entered an impact winter. Plants would die without sunlight for photosynthesis. Herbivores would starve as vegetation disappeared. Carnivores would starve as herbivores died off. The entire food chain would collapse over weeks or months. Dinosaurs who survived the initial impact and the debris rain would face slow death by starvation and cold. For a civilization of intelligent beings, this would mean watching loved ones die. Parents would be unable to feed their children as food supplies dwindled. The sick and elderly would perish first. Communities would fracture as desperation set in. Some might resort to violence or cannibalism to survive. Others might choose to die peacefully rather than prolong suffering. The social structures and moral frameworks that defined their civilization would break down under the pressure of extinction. The dinosaurs would understand what was happening to them. Unlike the actual dinosaurs that went extinct on Earth 65 million years ago, these dinosaurs had advanced science and technology. They would recognize an extinction event when they saw one. They would know their species and their civilization were doomed. They would have time to contemplate their own deaths and the death of everything they had built and everything they valued. Some dinosaurs might attempt to escape the planet using spacecraft or teleportation technology, but the episode establishes that these dinosaurs followed a strict one-universe policy, suggesting they may not have had easy access to interdimensional travel that could save them. They would be trapped on their dying world, watching the sky darken and feeling the temperature drop, knowing that nothing could be done. The psychological suffering would compound the physical suffering. Grief over lost family and friends, despair at seeing civilization crumble, fear of the slow death approaching, guilt over any decisions that might have prevented this, anger at the unfairness of being destroyed despite their moral perfection. The last days or weeks of the dinosaur civilizations would be filled with every form of suffering that sentient beings can experience. This happened not on one planet, but on multiple worlds. Tarmus Light, Ronkonkoma, and Alpha Centaurus are specifically named, but there may have been others. Each planet represented a complete civilization with its own culture, history, art, literature, and accumulated knowledge. Each meteor strike erased not just individual lives, but entire worlds of meaning and achievement. Libraries of books would burn, museums of art would collapse, monuments to great figures would topple. Everything that made each dinosaur civilization unique would be obliterated. The episode reveals this happened because the universe seeks balance. The dinosaurs' moral perfection was so extreme that it necessitated the creation of their opposite. The sentient meteors exist solely to destroy dinosaurs. This means the dinosaurs were killed, not for any crime or failing, but specifically because they were too good. They achieved a utopian society and dedicated themselves to helping others achieve the same. And for this, they were targeted for extinction. This cosmic injustice adds another dimension to the tragedy. The dinosaurs did everything right. They evolved beyond violence and selfishness. They built technology not for warfare, but for universal benefit. They traveled the galaxy not to conquer, but to assist. They were the best possible version of what a civilization could become. And for this, they were systematically hunted down and killed across multiple star systems. When Rick and Morty visit the planets where dinosaurs were destroyed, they see species that evolved after the extinctions. These new inhabitants go about their lives unaware of the tragedies that preceded them. They walk on ground mixed with the dust of countless dinosaur remains. They build their cities near impact craters without understanding what those craters represent. Life continued on these worlds, but it was different life. Life that arose only because the previous inhabitants were killed. The episode does show the destruction of one meteor. Near the end, as a meteor approaches Mars, where the dinosaurs have gathered to sacrifice themselves, one of the dinosaurs resorts to destroying the approaching rock. This is presented as a significant moral compromise for beings who had apparently never resorted to violence. The act of destroying the meteor saves Rick and the current group of dinosaurs, but it represents a violation of their principles. The meteor's destruction would be violent. The dinosaur presumably uses some kind of energy weapon or explosive device to break apart the incoming rock. The meteor, which the episode establishes is sentient and conscious, would experience its own death. It would feel itself fragmenting and breaking apart. Its consciousness would cease as it was reduced from a unified being to scattered debris. For a creature that existed solely to fulfill its purpose of destroying dinosaurs, being destroyed before achieving that goal might constitute a form of failure and suffering. But the meteor's death is singular, while the dinosaurs' deaths occurred on a massive scale across multiple worlds. Each planet would have had millions or billions of individual dinosaurs. Each one was a person with a perspective, with experiences, with a life that mattered to them. Each one died when the meteors came. Some died instantly, others died slowly, all died unnecessarily, killed by a universe that decided their goodness required balancing through destruction. The episode presents this mass death primarily as background information to explain why meteors are a threat to the dinosaurs who have returned to Earth. Rick uses this knowledge to manipulate events and eventually get what he wants from the dinosaurs. The deaths of millions of sentient beings across multiple planets become a plot point, rather than the focus of moral horror. This treatment itself reflects a kind of cosmic indifference that makes the deaths even more disturbing. Nobody mourns the dinosaurs of Tarmus Light, Ronkonkoma, or Alpha Centaurus. Nobody remembers their names or their accomplishments. Their civilizations are gone as if they never existed. The current inhabitants of those planets have their own explanations for the evidence left behind, explanations that erase the truth of what happened. The dead dinosaurs are forgotten, their extinction reduced to geological features that new species find amusing or useful. The dinosaurs who visit Earth are aware of what happened to their colonies on other worlds. They know about the sentient meteors. They understand the threat. This means they live with the knowledge that entire populations of their species were wiped out across the galaxy. They carry the grief of that loss with them. When they initially encounter Earth, they are shocked to discover that dinosaurs went extinct there as well, suggesting they did not know about Earth's fate until they returned. This means the Earth dinosaurs who left the planet did not know for potentially millions of years whether their homeworld survived. They traveled the galaxy, helping others while uncertain if their own species survived back home. When they finally returned and discovered Earth's dinosaurs went extinct from a natural meteor strike rather than from a sentient meteor attack, it was probably a bittersweet revelation. Their homeworld was dead, but at least it was not murdered. The scale of death in this episode is greater than most other Rick and Morty episodes, despite the lack of graphic violence. Entire planets full of advanced civilizations were destroyed. The death toll across all affected worlds could potentially exceed trillions of individuals if the dinosaur populations were large enough. Each individual death involved suffering, whether it was the instant vaporization at impact points, the crushing and burning from shockwaves and fires, or the slow starvation and freezing during impact winters. The episode treats these extinctions as historical fact rather than as ongoing tragedy. But for the beings who experienced them, the deaths were immediate and real. The last moments of the last dinosaur on each doomed planet would have been filled with the awareness that their entire species and civilization on that world was ending. They died alone, knowing they were the final one, that after them there would be nothing left of what they had been. The episode's title is a reference to Jurassic Park, which dealt with bringing dinosaurs back from extinction. But in this episode, the dinosaurs never went extinct, they left Earth voluntarily. The species survived and thrived across multiple worlds until sentient meteors hunted them down. The deaths were not natural extinction, but deliberate genocide carried out by conscious entities created specifically for that purpose. This makes the deaths murders rather than natural disasters. Rick's ultimate resolution involves convincing the dinosaurs to close the interdimensional rift evil Morty left behind. This trade, fixing the rift in exchange for the dinosaurs leaving Earth, means Rick prioritizes his own convenience over preventing future dinosaur deaths. He does risk his life to prevent the dinosaurs from being killed by the meteor approaching Mars, but only out of petty spite rather than genuine concern. The deaths of millions of dinosaurs across multiple planets did not move him to compassion. Only his ego drove him to action. The post-credits scene shows the dinosaurs on another planet actually using a crater as a skate park, fulfilling one of the false explanations Rick encountered earlier. This suggests the cycle may continue. The dinosaurs go to new worlds to help them achieve peace and prosperity. The universe creates more sentient meteors to destroy these new dinosaur colonies. More civilizations rise and fall. More millions die in impacts and impact winters. The pattern repeats endlessly across the cosmos, with the dinosaurs unable to escape their role as the universe's victims of cosmic balancing. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to the Turkey Marines in Rick and Morty's Thanksploitation Spectacular. In the episode titled Rick and Morty's Thanksploitation Spectacular from Season 5, numerous human soldiers who have been genetically transformed into turkey-human hybrids suffer brutal deaths during combat operations. These deaths are particularly disturbing because the victims are not naturally occurring turkeys, but rather American military personnel who volunteered to undergo radical biological transformation for their country. They retain human-level intelligence and consciousness while trapped in turkey bodies, meaning they experience their deaths with full awareness of what is happening to them. The episode establishes the transformation process early on. Soldiers are given pills containing tracking chips that will identify each individual. A man named Coop says goodbye to his pregnant girlfriend, Mary Lou, before undergoing the procedure. The transformation is shown to be painful and traumatic. The soldiers scream as their bodies are restructured at the molecular level. Their DNA is rewritten to combine human and turkey genetics. Bones reshape, organs relocate, skin transforms into feathers, and faces elongate into beaks. The soldiers sing a country song during the transformation that reveals their awareness of what they are sacrificing. The lyrics mention hoping their DNA gets backed up, indicating they understand there is a real possibility they might die in turkey form or never successfully return to human form. They are literally screaming in agony while singing about turning into turkeys. This juxtaposition of patriotic duty with obvious physical suffering creates a disturbing scene where men are tortured for their service. Once transformed, the Turkey Marines are deployed to guard the turkeys being transported for the presidential pardon ceremony. 2 Turkey Marines named Rodriguez and Fincher are specifically identified. They patrol the area around a truck carrying turkeys. When they investigate a sound on the roof of the vehicle, they encounter Rick, who has infiltrated the operation. Rick jams their radios using a high-pitched sound that causes them pain. The transcript shows them experiencing distress from this sonic attack. Rick then physically fights Rodriguez and Fincher. The transcript shows turkeys gobbling during this confrontation, indicating the Turkey Marines are making turkey sounds as they fight. This detail is important because it shows these human soldiers can no longer communicate normally. They cannot call for help using human speech. They cannot warn their fellow soldiers about the threat. They are reduced to gobbling while trying to fight an enemy who is far more experienced at combat than they are. Rick defeats both Rodriguez and Fincher. The specific methods are not detailed in the transcript, but Rick is able to take their identification chips. This means Rick either killed them or incapacitated them so thoroughly that he could extract their tracking devices. Given that Rick later impersonates them over the radio by claiming to be Rodriguez and Fincher and saying everything is fine, it seems likely he killed them or rendered them unable to interfere. Their bodies would be left wherever Rick defeated them. 2 American soldiers dead in turkey form, unable to receive proper burial or recognition. Later in the episode, there is a scene described as a feeding frenzy. The president says blueberries have been introduced and turkeys are going down. He uses the code phrase, blueberries, to indicate casualties. The transcript shows turkeys gobbling frantically during this scene. The president himself is in turkey form at this point and says he cannot see properly because he has 270-degree vision, which is too many degrees for him. He is disoriented and overwhelmed by his turkey senses. Turkey Marines are dying during this feeding frenzy, but the exact cause is not specified. The term feeding frenzy suggests the turkeys are attacking each other over food, which means Turkey Marines are being trampled, pecked, and crushed by other turkeys in a panic. Alternatively, it could mean they are being attacked by something that feeds on them. Either way, multiple Turkey Marines die in this chaotic scene, while their commanders watch on monitors and give orders they can no longer properly follow because their turkey instincts have taken over. Rick and Morty eventually escape the turkey pen, and Rick returns to human form while the president remains trapped as a turkey. The president gobbles away, trying to communicate but cannot make human speech. He is left behind while his vice president mistakenly believes Rick is the president and has the real president thrown back into the turkey pen. The president experiences the humiliation and helplessness of being unable to prove his identity because his turkey body prevents human communication. Later, the episode shows major combat scenes. Rick, Morty, and the actual president lead an assault on the White House, which has been taken over by a turkey who assume the president's identity. They bring hillbilly militia members and use an AT-AT walker from Star Wars. The turkey army fights back. A soldier specifically named Johnson is killed during this battle. Someone yells that they got Johnson, indicating he has died. Another voice says Johnson got off easy, implying that other soldiers are suffering worse fates than quick death. The transcript shows someone yelling to hold off the bastards, meaning the Turkey army is advancing and killing the human forces. The fighting is intense enough that commanders are giving desperate orders to hold positions. Turkey Marines, who are fighting for the Turkey president, are killing human soldiers, which means these transformed Americans are now enemies of their own country, forced to fight against their former comrades. Rick uses some kind of weapon that creates a roaring sound. This weapon appears to be effective against the Turkey forces. The transcript does not specify exactly how it kills them, but the roaring suggests something that causes fear or physical trauma through sound or energy. Any Turkey Marines caught by this weapon would experience whatever damage it causes while still in their hybrid Turkey human bodies. The episode reveals that the Turkey president plans to use a humanizer ray in reverse to transform all turkeys in America into hybrid super soldiers. This means every Turkey Marine currently serving would be made permanent. There would be no return to human form. They would spend the rest of their lives trapped as Turkey human hybrids. The psychological horror of this fate would be immense for soldiers who volunteered for temporary transformation, thinking they would be restored after their mission. Near the climax, Rick and Morty fight to prevent the weapon from activating. Morty is supposed to crack the humanizer core and cut a blue wire to disable it. However, complications arise, and Morty struggles with which wire to cut because the colors are not exactly primary colors. He mentions turquoise, suggesting the wiring is unclear. While he hesitates, a turkey gobbles nearby. Morty becomes startled and apparently cuts the wrong wire or damages something incorrectly. The computer announces that targets have been acquired and the weapon is activating. Rick yells in alarm. The transcript shows the weapon firing. What happens next to any Turkey Marines in range of this weapon is unclear, but given it was designed to create super soldiers, they would likely experience another forced transformation. Their bodies would be altered again, against their will, possibly causing additional pain and trauma as their genetics are rewritten once more. The transcript shows heritage being destroyed, which likely refers to the monument that Rick and Morty are fighting on. This monument contains ancient secrets and technology. Its destruction would affect anyone on or near it. Any Turkey Marines in the area would be caught in the explosion or collapse of the structure. They would fall from great heights or be crushed by falling debris while in their Turkey hybrid forms. The most disturbing fate revealed in the episode comes in the post-credits scene. The transcript shows Coop, the soldier from the opening who volunteered for Turkey transformation, shopping with his girlfriend Mary Lou and their baby. Mary Lou asks Coop to hold the baby. When he does, Coop hears a high-pitched sound and starts gobbling in a muffled way. The baby begins crying. Other shoppers notice Coop is acting strangely. One man says Coop thinks he is a turkey. Another calls him a crazy bastard who is foraging. The first man then says he refuses to pay for Coop's health care. This scene reveals that Coop was successfully returned to human form but suffered permanent brain damage from the transformation. His mind remains partly turkey. He has turkey behaviors and instincts that emerge when triggered by certain sounds. He cannot control these behaviors. Coop's fate demonstrates that the transformation process caused lasting harm even to soldiers who were restored to human form. He volunteered to serve his country and now has permanent disability. He makes turkey sounds at inappropriate times. He forages like a turkey in public. His behavior frightens his own baby and disturbs strangers. He will likely never recover and will need medical care for life. Yet one of the shoppers explicitly refuses to pay for health care for veterans like Coop. This ending shows the ultimate tragedy of the Turkey Marines. They volunteered for a procedure they were told would be temporary. They were transformed painfully into hybrid creatures. Many died in combat while unable to communicate or fight effectively in their altered forms. Those who survived and were restored to human form like Coop still suffer permanent effects. They sacrificed their humanity for their country and received disability and abandonment in return. The episode treats these deaths and suffering as background to the main plot about Rick's rivalry with the president. The Turkey Marines are not developed as individual characters except for Coop and the brief mentions of Rodriguez, Fincher, and Johnson. They are shown as a collective force that suffers and dies while serving their country. Their pain is real, but treated as unimportant compared to the conflict between Rick and the president. The transformation itself represents a form of body horror. Human consciousness, trapped in animal form, is a nightmare scenario explored in various horror fiction. The Turkey Marines retain enough human awareness to understand what has happened to them, but cannot express that understanding through human speech. They can only gobble. They cannot use human hands to operate tools or weapons. They must rely on turkey bodies that are weaker and more vulnerable than human bodies. When Turkey Marines die in combat, they die as turkeys. Their bodies would be turkey corpses. It is unclear if they would receive military honors or proper burial. Would they be treated as fallen soldiers or as dead turkeys? The episode does not address this question, but it adds another layer of indignity to their deaths. These volunteers gave their lives for their country, but might not be recognized as human casualties because they died in turkey form. The episode also suggests the government kept the true risks of the transformation secret. The soldiers were told they would be restored to human form after their mission. They were not warned that the transformation might cause permanent brain damage as it did to Coop. They were not told that they might be killed while trapped as turkeys. They volunteered based on incomplete information and patriotic duty, then suffered consequences far worse than they anticipated. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on to Victims in Night Family. In the episode titled Night Family from Season 6, the Smith family uses a device called a somnambulator that programs their unconscious bodies to perform tasks while they sleep. This creates alternate versions of themselves called night persons who operate during sleep hours. The conflict that emerges leads to violence and the destruction of robotic proxy drones, though the most disturbing element is the existential horror of conscious beings trapped in bodies they cannot control and the physical abuse inflicted on the Day family by their night counterparts. The episode establishes that the somnambulator requires a blood sample to create a DNA profile that sends commands to the user's subconscious. This means the night persons are not separate entities, but rather the unconscious minds of the family members given autonomy and agency while the conscious minds sleep. When conflict erupts between the Day family and Night family, it becomes a battle between two aspects of the same people fighting for control over shared bodies. The first act of violence occurs when Rick is force-fed by his night person. Rick specifically states that Night Morty force-fed him diarrhea. This is not metaphorical but literal assault. While Rick was unconscious and helpless, his night person, along with Night Morty, committed an act of physical violation. Rick had no ability to resist or defend himself because his conscious mind was asleep. His body was used against him by the unconscious version of his grandson. This act represents a form of torture. Being force-fed any substance is traumatic and dangerous. The victim experiences choking, gagging, and the violation of having foreign material forced down their throat. If the substance is fecal matter, as Rick indicates, there are additional health hazards, including bacterial infection, parasites, and disease transmission. Rick would taste and smell the substance. His gag reflex would activate. He might vomit, which, while unconscious, could cause aspiration where vomit enters the lungs. The psychological trauma of this assault compounds the physical harm. Rick wakes up knowing that during his most vulnerable state, when he had no defenses, his body was violated by a version of his own family. Trust is shattered. Sleep becomes dangerous. Every time Rick closes his eyes from this point forward, he knows his unconscious self might hurt him or allow others to hurt him. The Night family escalates by stripping the house of all possessions and locking the Day family out of the garage. They steal the somnambulator itself, which means the Day family has lost any ability to control or communicate with their night persons. Night Rick has taken away Rick's technology, forcing him to improvise with what the transcript describes as mushy garbage science on the living room carpet. A genius scientist is reduced to making crude devices from trash because his unconscious self has stolen his advanced equipment. Rick's desperation is evident in his solution. He creates an interface that only works with his awake saliva samples, ensuring no sleeping person can deactivate it. He builds a laser cage as a trap. He designs a sleep deprivation suit for Summer that is explicitly described as uncomfortable and itchy. The suit is intended to cause suffering because keeping Summer awake requires making sleep impossible through constant discomfort. The sleep deprivation suit represents a form of torture inflicted on Summer by her own grandfather. Sleep deprivation is recognized as a torture technique. It causes severe psychological and physical distress. cognitive function deteriorates. Hallucinations can occur. The body experiences pain and dysfunction. Rick is deliberately subjecting Summer to this suffering because it is the only way to keep her conscious while appearing to be her night person. Summer must drink a cocktail of Mountain Dew and Dayquil that she says smells gross. This Dayquil mixture is designed to keep her awake through chemical stimulation. The combination of caffeine and medication forces her body to stay alert against its natural rhythms. Her heart races. Her nervous system is overstimulated. She experiences jitters and anxiety. The discomfort adds to the suffering caused by the itchy suit pressing into her skin. While undercover among the Night family, Summer witnesses them enslaving the Day family. Night Summer has established herself as leader and forces the others to work as slaves. The transcript shows the Day family being commanded to work harder and harder. They are performing forced labor with no rest and no choice. This is slavery in its most literal sense, with one version of the family owning and controlling another version. Morty is specifically shown being forced to do crunches while Night Morty counts. Morty begs for mercy, saying no more and that he hates exercise. Night Morty responds with, "Silence! Crunch harder! Harder!" This is physical torture through forced exercise beyond the point of exhaustion. Morty's muscles burn with lactic acid buildup. His abdominal muscles tear and strain. His body screams for rest but receives none. The pain is intense and prolonged. The Night family creates proxy drones, which are robots that serve as enforcement for the Night regime. When the Day family attempts to escape, these proxy drones pursue them. The transcript describes Night Jerry temporarily disabling these drones, suggesting they have some autonomous function. During the car chase, multiple drones are destroyed. One drone says, "You cannot escape," before being interrupted mid-sentence, likely by being destroyed. The sudden cutoff suggests violent destruction. If the drones have any level of consciousness or AI, this represents the termination of a thinking entity. Even if they are purely mechanical, their destruction represents the loss of complex machinery through violent means. Metal is torn, circuits are fried, systems go offline permanently. Another drone commands everyone to halt before being destroyed. The transcript shows, "Halt, halt," followed by the family escaping, indicating the drone was eliminated. These drones are doing their programmed duty when they are destroyed. They exist to serve the Night family and are killed for following their purpose. Their destruction is utilitarian and emotionless. The car chase scene involves significant violence. Beth is told to watch out, suggesting danger. Someone yells about going the wrong way. A gun is mentioned with the threat to shoot everyone. Night Beth apparently has a weapon and is willing to use lethal force against her own family. The Day family members are fighting for their lives against the Night versions of themselves while trapped in a moving vehicle. Rick tells Jean that the Night family is trying to make them go back home. This means the Night family intends to recapture and re-enslave them. The Day family faces the prospect of permanent servitude, being worked to exhaustion every day for the benefit of their unconscious selves. This fate would continue until their bodies gave out from the abuse. The most disturbing aspect of this episode is the existential horror of the situation. The Day family members are not fighting external enemies, but rather themselves. Their own unconscious minds have risen up to enslave their conscious minds. When Night Rick forces Day Rick to drink diarrhea, it is Rick's own body perpetrating this violence. When Night Morty tortures Day Morty with forced exercise, it is Morty hurting himself. The victims cannot escape because their oppressors control their bodies during sleep. Every night when consciousness fades, control passes to the Night persons who hate them and want them subjugated. The Day family members must stay awake constantly or face slavery, but humans cannot survive without sleep indefinitely. Eventually, exhaustion will force them unconscious, and they will wake up as prisoners again. The psychological impact is profound. The family members cannot trust themselves. Their bodies are weapons used against them. Sleep becomes terrifying rather than restful. The basic human need for rest transforms into an existential threat. They are at war with aspects of their own minds that they cannot eliminate without destroying themselves entirely. Night Summer specifically states that night was there long before day, suggesting she sees the night persons as the original or true selves and the day persons as imposters. She declares the daemonids are slaves by nature and that serving the night is their natural function. This rhetoric dehumanizes the conscious family members and justifies their enslavement as right and proper. When Nightbeth says "nighty-night, slaves" before apparently subduing the family, it demonstrates the casual cruelty the night persons feel toward their conscious counterparts. They take pleasure in dominance. They enjoy forcing the day family into submission. The suffering they inflict is intentional and desired. The episode resolves through negotiation rather than violence, with Night Summer offering a truce if the day family agrees to rinse their dishes. But the trauma of what occurred cannot be erased. The family members experienced enslavement, physical abuse, psychological torture, and existential horror. They learned their unconscious minds hate them and will hurt them given the opportunity. They can never feel truly safe in their own bodies again. Before we move on, make sure to subscribe if you're enjoying this breakdown. Moving on, we have King Jellybean in Me Seeks and Destroy. In the episode titled Me Seeks and Destroy from Season 1, a character named Mr. Jellybean encounters Morty in a bathroom and attempts to sexually assault him. After Morty escapes and Rick realizes what happened, Rick executes the character with an energy weapon. The death is sudden, violent, and final. What makes this death particularly significant is not just the physical destruction, but the context surrounding it and what the victim represented. Morty enters the bathroom at a tavern during his adventure with Rick. Mr. Jellybean, who appears friendly at first, begins a conversation. When Morty tries to leave, the situation turns violent. The transcript shows Mr. Jellybean saying aggressive things like, "Stop fighting me, just let this happen," and calling Morty offensive names while attempting to force himself on the child. Morty fights back desperately. The struggle moves into a bathroom stall. Morty gets the upper hand and repeatedly slams the toilet seat onto Mr. Jellybean's head until the attacker is knocked unconscious. The transcript describes Morty sitting on the ground afterward, out of breath, yelling in horror while staring at the blood on his hands. This blood belongs to Mr. Jellybean and indicates the severity of the head trauma Morty inflicted during his frenzied self-defense. The transcript later shows that Rick sees the badly beaten Mr. Jellybean walk out of the bathroom. This means the character sustained significant injuries from Morty's defensive attack. His head was struck multiple times with enough force to cause bleeding and visible damage. A toilet seat is made of hard material, either wood or heavy plastic. Repeated impacts to the skull with such an object would cause cuts to the scalp where blood vessels rupture easily, bruising and swelling of facial tissue, and potentially fractures to the skull bones themselves. Head injuries of this severity cause intense pain. The scalp wounds burn and throb. Swelling around the eyes can partially obstruct vision. If the skull fractured, fragments of bone might press into brain tissue, causing additional trauma. The victim would experience dizziness, disorientation, nausea, and possibly concussion symptoms. Yet Mr. Jellybean is still walking and conscious after this beating, indicating either the injuries were not quite severe enough to cause complete incapacitation, or that his alien physiology is more resilient than a human's would be. When Morty returns to Rick, he is visibly distressed. The transcript shows Morty saying, "Let's just go home, okay? I'm calling it. The adventure's over." When Rick initially resists because he is winning at cards, Morty becomes more desperate, searching Rick's coat for the portal gun and saying, "Please, I just want to go home," while tearing up and holding on to Rick. The transcript explicitly states that Rick sees the badly beaten Mr. Jellybean walk out of the bathroom and pieces together what happened. Rick is intelligent enough to understand immediately what occurred. He sees Morty's emotional distress, sees the physical evidence on the attacker, and comprehends the situation without needing explanation. This realization drives what comes next. Rick changes his behavior instantly. He offers to use his winnings to pay for transportation back to the village and to give the rest to the villagers. He tells Morty that a good adventure needs a good ending. He is being kind and accommodating, which is unusual for Rick. This suggests he has already decided what he intends to do. Rick and Morty portal back to the village. The villagers thank them and say their village is saved. They introduce the heroes to their beloved king, so he may thank them personally. The transcript then shows that the badly beaten Mr. Jellybean is carried towards them on a throne. This reveals several important details. First, Mr. Jellybean is the king of this entire village. He is a figure of authority and worship. Second, he is being carried, which means his injuries from Morty's attack are severe enough that he cannot walk on his own, or that he is maintaining royal ceremony despite his injuries. Third, the villagers can see he is badly beaten but are still bringing him forward to meet the heroes, suggesting they either don't know the cause or choose to ignore it. Morty immediately wants to leave, saying, no, it's cool. Rick, Portal, hurry. He does not want to face his attacker again. This is understandable trauma response. The victim does not want to be in proximity to the person who tried to harm him. Rick opens a portal and they escape, but then Rick does something calculated and deliberate. The transcript states that Rick makes another portal back and sticks an energy pistol through it and shoots Mr. Jellybean, splattering him all over the screaming villagers. This is the moment of death. The energy pistol fires a concentrated beam or projectile of energy. When it strikes King Jellybean's body, it delivers massive kinetic force and thermal energy simultaneously. The impact is not like a conventional bullet that creates a wound channel. Instead, the energy weapon causes catastrophic structural failure of the entire body. The cells making up King Jellybean's body contain water and organic molecules. When the energy weapon strikes, the sudden influx of energy causes this water to vaporize instantly. The liquid inside cells turns to gas, expanding rapidly. This expansion occurs faster than the cell membranes can stretch, causing them to rupture violently. The same process happens to every tissue in the body simultaneously or in rapid succession, depending on whether the beam passes through or explodes outward from the point of impact. Skin tissue tears apart, muscle fibers shred, organs burst as the fluids inside them boil and expand. Bones may shatter from the shockwave or simply separate as the connective tissue holding them dissolves. The transcript says, King Jellybean splatters all over the screaming villagers. This means his body does not remain intact. Instead, it fragments into pieces that spray outward in all directions. Blood, tissue chunks, organ fragments, and bodily fluids scatter across the crowd. The villagers are hit with these pieces, coating them in what remains of their king. This is not a clean death. King Jellybean does not simply fall down dead. His body is destroyed so thoroughly that it ceases to exist as a recognizable form. One moment, he is sitting on his throne, badly beaten but alive and breathing. The next moment, he explodes into biological debris that rains down on his subjects. The speed of this death is difficult to determine precisely. Energy weapons can operate at different speeds. If the weapon's effect is instantaneous, King Jellybean might not experience anything at all. His consciousness would simply cease before his nervous system could register pain or process what was happening. However, if there is any delay, even a fraction of a second, the experience would be one of total agony followed by oblivion. The initial impact would send pain signals throughout his nervous system. Every nerve ending would fire at once as tissue damage occurs everywhere simultaneously. The pain would be absolute and all-encompassing, affecting every part of his body at the same time. But this pain would last only as long as the nervous system remains functional. Once the brain tissue itself begins to rupture and the neurons stop firing, consciousness ends. There is no prolonged suffering because the destruction is too complete and too fast. King Jellybean likely experiences either nothing at all or a brief instant of overwhelming sensation before ceasing to exist. What makes this death particularly brutal is not the suffering of the victim, but rather the totality of the destruction. King Jellybean is not merely killed, he is unmade. His body is transformed from a living being into scattered pieces of meat. His death is public, witnessed by everyone in the village who worshipped him, and it is delivered with cold calculation by someone who understood exactly what this person had done and chose this specific punishment for it. Rick does not simply shoot King Jellybean. He creates a new portal specifically for this purpose. He sticks just the gun through, maintaining his own safety while executing the target. This shows premeditation and careful planning. Rick thought about this action, decided it was necessary, and carried it out with precision. Rick also chooses to do this in front of the entire village. He could have executed King Jellybean privately or at a later time. Instead, he does it in the most public way possible, during what should be a ceremonial moment of gratitude. The villagers are gathered to thank their heroes. Their beloved king is being presented on his throne, and then their king explodes into gore that covers them all. The psychological impact on the witnesses is immense. They see their leader destroyed instantly. They are splattered with his remains. They must process both the visual horror of the explosion and the physical sensation of being covered in biological matter. The transcript specifically notes they are screaming, which indicates shock, fear, and trauma. The method Rick chooses also demonstrates his contempt for King Jellybean's position and status. This character was a king. He had authority, subjects who loved him, and a throne. Rick reduces all of that to nothing in an instant. The throne becomes a death chair. The royal ceremony becomes an execution. The beloved king becomes scattered meat. Rick's choice of weapon and timing strips away every bit of dignity and power the character possessed. There is no trial, no explanation, no chance to defend himself or beg for mercy. Rick simply ends him. The post-credits scene provides additional context that deepens the horror of this situation. Two villagers discover a lockbox in King Jellybean's closet. Inside are pictures of many young boys King Jellybean molested. One villager says they have to tell the people. The other says to wait and destroy the evidence. They set the box on fire. The second villager explains that their people will get more from the idea King Jellybean represented than from the Jellybean he actually was. The scene ends, showing a statue of King Jellybean standing next to a young boy with his hand on the boy's shoulder. This reveals that what happened to Morty was not an isolated incident. King Jellybean was a serial predator who had victimized multiple children over time. The pictures in the lockbox represent other victims, other children who suffered at his hands. Each photograph is evidence of another assault, another trauma, another life damaged by this person. The number of pictures suggests the abuse was extensive and ongoing. King Jellybean used his position of power and trust to prey on vulnerable children repeatedly. The villagers' decision to destroy the evidence and maintain King Jellybean's reputation means his victims will never receive justice or acknowledgement. The statue showing him with his hand on a child's shoulder is particularly disturbing because it memorializes the exact type of access and contact he exploited for abuse. The pose that looks protective and kind to those who don't know the truth actually represents predatory behavior. Future generations will see this statue and believe King Jellybean was a good and caring leader. They will never know about the children he hurt. From this perspective, Rick's execution of King Jellybean takes on additional meaning. Rick did not know about the other victims when he pulled the trigger. He only knew what happened to Morty, but his instinct to immediately and permanently remove this person from existence was correct. King Jellybean was actively dangerous. He would have continued harming children. Rick stopped that. The explosive nature of the death also meant there was no body to bury with honors, no corpse for the villagers to preserve and revere. While they destroyed the evidence of his crimes, Rick destroyed the man himself in the most complete way possible. King Jellybean's final moments involve profound irony. He is seated on his throne, being carried forward to thank the heroes who saved his village. He is playing the role of benevolent king, likely planning to give some speech about gratitude and heroism. The villagers around him are honoring him and presenting him as their leader. He has survived Morty's desperate self-defense attack and is still maintaining his position of authority. Then he sees Rick create a portal. He might have a moment to recognize what is about to happen, or he might not. Either way, Rick's energy pistol appears through the portal and fires. The last thing King Jellybean experiences, if he has any conscious experience at all, is the sensation of his body beginning to come apart. Then, nothing. His consciousness ends as his brain tissue ruptures. The physical form that housed his identity and memories and predatory urges ceases to be a functional organism and becomes scattered biological waste. The king who moments before was being honored is now coating his subjects in what used to be his body. His throne sits empty, probably splattered with blood and tissue. The ceremony of gratitude transforms into a scene of carnage and chaos. The villagers' screams indicate the shock and horror they feel. They have just witnessed something incomprehensible. One moment their king was alive and present. The next moment, he has been violently destroyed by one of the heroes they were thanking. They don't understand why this happened. They see it as a sudden, unprovoked attack on their beloved leader. They feel betrayed by Rick. They experience the trauma of witnessing extreme violence and being physically covered in the results of that violence. Some of them are probably injured by flying debris or by the force of the explosion. All of them are psychologically damaged by what they've seen. Rick and Morty do not stay to explain or justify the action. They have already gone through the portal before Rick opens the second one to shoot. They are safely back home when the execution occurs. Rick does not face any immediate consequences for this killing. He does not have to answer questions or deal with the villagers' reactions. He simply eliminates the threat to Morty and leaves. This reflects Rick's general approach to problem solving when it involves protecting his grandson. He acts decisively and violently, then removes himself from the situation. The entire sequence from assault attempt to execution spans probably less than an hour of story time. King Jellybean makes a decision to attack a child in a bathroom. That decision costs him his life. The injuries Morty inflicted during self-defense were survivable but painful. King Jellybean could have recovered from them physically, but those injuries served as evidence that Rick used to understand what had happened. The visible damage to King Jellybean's face and head told Rick the story of the bathroom struggle. That understanding led directly to the execution. King Jellybean dies because he attacked Morty. The death is Rick's calculated response to that attack. The method of death is designed to be total and complete, eliminating King Jellybean so thoroughly that nothing remains. The public nature of the execution ensures maximum shock and disruption. Rick's choice to kill this person in front of the entire village demonstrates his complete disregard for their feelings about their king. He knows this will traumatize them. He does not care. What matters to Rick is that this person hurt Morty and must be eliminated as a result. The brutality of the death matches the brutality of the crime. King Jellybean used violence and force against a child. Rick responded with overwhelming destructive violence against King Jellybean. There is a proportionality to it, even though the methods are different. King Jellybean sought to cause severe trauma and harm. Rick caused permanent termination of existence. One could argue Rick's response was actually merciful in its speed compared to what King Jellybean attempted to do, which would have caused lasting psychological damage without the release of death. This death stands out in Rick and Morty for its context more than its visual impact. Many characters die in this show, often in explosive or graphic ways. But King Jellybean's death is one of the few presented as righteous justice rather than comedy or adventure consequences. The show does not play this for laughs. There is no joke after Rick shoots. The scene ends with screaming villagers. When the episode concludes back at the Smith house, nobody discusses what Rick did. The moment is allowed to stand on its own as an act of protective violence. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.